From normal to nightmare in 10 seconds. The unexplainable event that still haunts me. I'm curious if anyone else has had this happen. Years ago, my then wife and I would run into the same woman everywhere we went. And I mean everywhere we went. This went on for about a year. Go to the grocery store? She'd be there shopping. Starbucks? Yep, sitting right behind us. Walking around the mall? She'd pass us walking in the other direction. Movie theater? She'd be behind us in line getting popcorn. The creepiest encounter was while driving on the freeway. My wife looked at the car next to us and just screamed. Yep, it was her. She was always alone. She never talked to us and always made eye contact. She had a very unique appearance. She was very tall, very thin, and had very tight skin on her face. It was so unusual that we joked that we were being studied by an alien. It was some serious glitch in the matrix stuff. My cat hated me for the first 7 years we had him. He was a feral that was tamed by my wife and only accepted affection from her. My wife assured me that this was actually common for ferals. Then one day he suddenly just warmed up to me and wanted me to pet him. We've been best friends ever since. This was approximately 4 years ago, about the time my wife's brain cancer was becoming aggressive. Even before we were aware of it. She died 2 years ago. It's like he knew it was just going to be the two of us one day. It was years ago when I was about 17. I'd gotten home from school and I wasn't feeling well, so I spent the rest of the day just laying on the couch. By about 8 p.m. I was feeling even worse, and I decided I should just try to sleep off whatever it was, so I went to my room and got in bed and passed out pretty quickly. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I suddenly woke up in my pitch-black bedroom, and all I could think was, I'm going to die right now. My body was so weak and the room was spinning and my body felt like it was on fire. I looked over to the edge of my bed and sitting on the edge was my grandmother, who had died just a few months before. She pats my arm and says, "It's going to be okay. Just call for your dad. Try it. Call for your dad." So I started calling for him, and it felt like an eternity, but he finally burst through my door and asks what's wrong. I look over and my grandmother is gone. After that, he gets me up and takes me to the ER where I have a fever of 106 degrees Fahrenheit, which explains a lot. I had to get a ton of fluids and a shot in my hip, but eventually I felt okay-ish. Her being there felt so real. It was so weird. I knew logically she wasn't, but it felt just so tangible. That sort of messed with me a little. I loved her dearly, and her death was very sudden. We kept her ashes in a nice urn in the house under a painting she'd done herself. When I got home and passed by, I said thanks to her. I know it was the fever melting my brain and maybe some sleep paralysis, but it still made me question the whole afterlife and those sort of things. You could definitely write this off as a fever manifesting with an overt sign from your brain that all wasn't right, but I don't think that makes this any less special, to be honest. If you don't want to go the supernatural route, you can interpret this as your mind choosing a beloved figure to impart this message on you. In a way, it's just as beautiful. Well, about 7 years ago, I was at my mum's house. I lived next door, and this white car pulled into the driveway. We weren't expecting anyone, so I assumed they were lost and needed directions and went to the door. A white woman in her 50s or 60s got out, along with a 9 or 10-year-old black girl. Surprised me because I expected the kid to stay in the car if they just needed directions. I opened the door and the woman kind of nudges the girl towards me, both with big smiles on their faces. I said, "Hi, what can I help you with?" She asked if I was Rebecca, and I said yes. She told me they went to a neighbor's house looking for me, and they pointed her to our house. They just kind of stared at me expectantly, like I was supposed to know the girl and be happy to see her. When I didn't react, the woman told me they were here to see the dentist. No dentists here. Small ranch-style house in a fairly rural neighborhood. No dentists here. Not anywhere near us, in fact. The woman and the girl just kept on smiling. They didn't look confused. They just kept saying, "Are you sure?" Finally, they left, and later I asked the neighbor who had directed them to our house, and she said she never told the woman my name and that the woman asked for me specifically. It's always kind of haunted me. I really feel like I was supposed to know that girl. Like, if I was a guy, this would be someone trying to introduce me to a kid I didn't know I had. I honestly started wondering if I was nuts and I'd given up a child for adoption or something. It was that strange of a feeling. My mum firmly believes the girl will come back someday to tell me what it was about, and I think about it frequently. It drives me insane to wonder what they really wanted. When I was 12 or so and still living at my parents' house, I woke up in the middle of the night to pee. I got to the bathroom and I heard what sounded like a party going on downstairs. Laughter, music, the sound of glasses being knocked together for a toast, the whole shebang. I thought it was weird that my parents had friends over so late and they hadn't told me, but I decided to go and see who was there. I opened the door to the kitchen and the entire downstairs was completely dark and silent. Not even a TV on. I was thoroughly confused, but the strangeness of the situation didn't really register, so I never told anyone. Years and years later, I'd mentioned this to my dad and he said he'd heard them too. Turns out there used to be a small public bar in their home, which is over 150 years old. I guess some of the patrons decided to hang out for eternity. Not me, but my grandfather. My grandfather had been in World War II and told us about when himself and a few other soldiers had been separated from his unit and were trying to get to Normandy. They'd gone through a clearing in a wooded area, but had to drop when they heard something approaching. They were on their bellies in low grass when they saw 20 or 30 German soldiers running across the clearing, clearly in a state of panic. And then they all just froze in mid-step. He said they resembled statues and that some weren't even touching the ground, and that there was no noise whatsoever. Even the birds had fallen silent. After a few seconds came a loud noise like metal scraping on concrete, and the frozen soldiers started to become blurry to the point at which they vanished without a trace. This had been reported by all of the soldiers who were present, and all were called to the War Office in London after their return to the UK, where they were pressed on what they saw over the period of a few days and were taken back to the same spot in France shortly after the war ended. Surprisingly, when they got there were other men sharing the same accommodation who reported similar occurrences in the exact same area. They were all taken to the woods and had to describe where and how the events took place. My granddad said the entire area was guarded heavily and that part of the ground was heavily excavated. The strangest thing of all, he said, was that there were hundreds of dogs in the area just milling around for no apparent reason. They returned to the UK with a gag order ordering them to never speak about any of this. He actually went back to the same spot in France before he died in 1985 and said that the area had been covered with unmarked warehouses and was guarded by an unusually professional security company. He reckoned they were military. I've tried to find out more about this, but I can't find any records of it. But I do remember one of the guys he was with that day used to come by and visit sometimes and referred to the place as the Splintered Woods. I can think of a few things that happened in my first year of college. I used to live in an apartment place on campus with 3 other people. We all had our separate bedrooms but shared a living space. It was on the 7th floor, to give a better idea. Once I woke up at around 2 a.m. to find that my phone was automatically playing a song. I closed the app, but it happened another 2 or 3 times. I would have put this down to my phone being weird, but then one of my roommates told me the exact same thing happened to her as well. This wasn't all. A few days later, I woke up to a beeping sound coming from my phone, and when I checked, it was apparently a sound recording. The duration showed as 0.00 seconds though, which meant that it shouldn't technically play at all. I deleted it immediately. Another time, my roommate and I were watching a movie and had stayed up till 3. It ended and she went to sleep. After a few minutes, she burst into my room and asked me what I was doing. I was confused because I was just in bed reading. She said that she'd heard some very weird noises from the window, which she assumed I was making to scare her or something. I went to her room and it sounded like heavy breathing and sighing. I told her it was just the wind. We opened the window and saw that the trees were completely still out there. I don't have the same phone, room, or roommates anymore, even though I still stay on campus. It's not even that creepy, but the first time it happened was the first time I ever considered that anything supernatural might just be real. Very occasionally at my desk at work, I'd hear breathing in my left ear. There's a wall behind me, a window to my left, but you can't hear any outside noise. I don't feel a breeze or anything, I just hear it. It's peaceful and sad, like a sigh. My first thought was air conditioning, but it's such a clear sound that just cuts through everything as if it's coming from a whole different world to the general office noise. It's very definitely only in my left ear and I never hear it anywhere else. Every time it kicks in, I just very calmly get up and leave my desk for 5 minutes, and when I come back, it's gone. I burned about 10 filing cabinets full of papers for my high school friend's dad for less than minimum wage back in 2004. Literally millions of lines of words, maybe even 1 million pages, or close, just tossing them into a barrel, burning. After a few hours, I victoriously tossed in the last folder, and a little sprite of flame shot out and a singed fortune cookie-looking piece of paper floats to the ground in front of me with the words only, "What burns does not return." I still don't know what the frick that was. That probability is just astronomical. Hey, look man, I don't want to jump to any wild conclusions or anything, I'm just saying that you were definitely unwittingly aiding in the removal of evidence for something dark, and that message was the final parting blow from the spirits who'd go on unavenged because of your complicity. Again, not jumping to any conclusions. Not necessarily creepy, but definitely made me question reality. I used to work in a gas station. One regular customer was like night and day. One day he'd be soft-spoken and shy, the next he'd be obnoxious. His cigarette preference also changed from day to day, but he always came in the same work truck with the same guys at the same time of day. One day he walked in and went straight to the bathroom. A minute later, he walked in again and came to the counter. Twins. It took me 8 months to realize they were twins. And not even identical twins either, they just looked pretty similar. I have a story like this. My little sister and I look very much alike despite being 18 months apart. Similar faces, identical build, same height, give or take half an inch. Both of us have dark curly hair, though hers is dyed reddish-brown and has perfect ringlets. Mine is dyed black and has looser curls. Both of them wear glasses. In high school, someone asked her why she changed her clothes between classes. We got a good laugh out of that. Then at Christmas last year, my husband walked into my mom's kitchen and asked why I was making chicken salad when I don't eat meat. It totally wasn't me. I was at the store picking up last-minute items. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I used to visit my grandparents' house with my father every Sunday. A very odd family lived a few houses down. They had a massive property in the middle of old Pasadena. The house had 3 stories, a basement, and a huge backyard. I was introduced to the little girl that lived there at some birthday party. We'd sit on the side of the house and look for 4-leaf clovers. She told me she liked to play in the backyard barn, but nobody was allowed to go back there anymore. She promised there were tons of animals there, and I loved animals, so of course I wanted to go. She said we had to be very quiet and fast, but she'd show it to me. We had to follow this little trail maybe a quarter of a mile behind the house. There was a ton of foliage around the trail, and it blocked out the building, and there was a barn back there. It was massive and really something you'd see out of a movie. She said it had been in the family for a long time, but the barn looked pristine. When we approached it, she told me we had to be very quiet and that we couldn't go inside. We started playing around the barn, but not directly next to it. We started looking for clovers again for a while, before I remembered she'd mentioned animals. When I asked if we could go see them, she scrunched up her face and got up. She didn't say anything, but did get up and start walking towards the barn. The grass was overgrown right up against the barn, which didn't really make any sense because it looked brand new. The rest of the area was cleared out. The grass was only overgrown up near the barn. She started digging through the grass like she was looking for something. She wouldn't tell me what. The longer I stood next to the barn, the more uncomfortable I got. I felt like we were out somewhere we weren't supposed to be. I became a little distracted and started looking around for our parents or for some adult to jump out and tell us off. When I turned around again, there was a very large pile of bones sitting on the ground. I looked up at her and she was holding a very small skull in her hands. It looked like it would have belonged to a sheep, but was way smaller. She leaned in and whispered, "This is why we can't play back here. My mommy said he doesn't like animals anymore." I'm not sure why I wasn't freaked out. Once I noticed the bones, I could see them scattered all through the grass. We heard her mum calling for us and we ran back. It wasn't until a year or so later at another birthday party that I was in the backyard again. I asked her mum if we could go play by the barn and she looked at me like she'd seen an alien. She said they never had a barn. The trail to it just disappeared. There were big trees blocking the route there and everything. Something weird happened with the adults after that and I wasn't allowed to go to their house anymore. I have no idea what happened. It was very creepy. I'm fairly certain I had an overactive imagination as a child and dreamed all of it up. I asked my father a few years back if he'd ever seen that neighbor's barn, and he had no idea what I was talking about. Why would there be a barn in the middle of a big city? I almost got kidnapped. Maybe. I hailed a lift because I was too drunk to drive. The car pulled up, I got in and was like, "Take me to 123 Fake Street." Obviously with my real address. The phone rings and I answer and I hear, "I'm your Lyft driver. I just watched you get into a car that isn't your Lyft. You need to get out right now." "Oh, good. Oh, hey bud, I'm getting a friend to pick me up. Thanks anyway." I hopped out at the red light we were stopped at. The driver and I talked about how one of the reasons we didn't have Lyft in my city for a while was because girls were getting kidnapped and forced into trafficking. So now, since these guys can't use rideshare apps, they're preying on drunk women that they see on the street, hailing a ride, and they just pick them up. Thankfully, I got into the front seat because the back might have had a child lock on. I asked the driver to make sure I got into my house before driving away since old Creeper had my address. Went to pick up my car the next day, and not only did I not get trafficked, I didn't get a parking ticket either, so that was cool. I'm definitely a lot more cautious now. It's really weird thinking that it might have been a life-destroying event. I'm the kind of person who keeps my bedroom door closed and locked at all times, no matter what, even if I'm home alone. So like a year ago, it was 1 a.m. and I decided to get a glass of water before going to bed. After coming back in my room, I swear that I closed and locked the door. After about 30 minutes of me dozing in and out of sleep, I suddenly felt all the ambient noise completely dissipate, and I immediately got my something feels off feeling. I got up and saw that my door was wide open. It scared the crap out of me as I was home alone. I've just chalked it up to being a one-time mishap on my part. You know, this kinda reads like the opening part of a horror movie, where you're the initial victim, so the audience gets a glimpse of what's to come. I mean, that thing clearly got into your locked bedroom. I guess in this case, it's got a call from its kid's daycare or something and had to bail halfway through though. So you got lucky. I had 2 bananas, connected at the stem part. I broke them into 2, ate one, threw out the peel, and came back for the other one, and it was gone. I live alone. Either I have a rotting banana somewhere in my apartment, or I've gone crazy. Update, it's been weeks and I haven't seen or smelled the other banana. I'll accept that I just went bananas for that moment. I have 2 wireless mouses, one for a work laptop and one for my personal laptop. When I let things get messy, I usually just stack one laptop on top of the closed one underneath, with both mouses near the mousepad. So, I get a call from work saying I need to hop online. I open my work laptop and grab the mouse and start opening my work portal. I open email, I do my usual routine, everything works fine. Then I realize that I'm using the mouse connected to my personal laptop on my work laptop. I shake the mouse. No response. It stopped working once I realized that it shouldn't be working. Ever since then, I found it hard to believe that we don't live in some sort of simulation. I was camping with my family on summer break when I was a kid. The first night we heard some rustling off in the distance, so my dad went to go check it out. He came back and said he found an old dirty sleeping bag with a bunch of trash around it. I took this as him implying that it could have been a camp that got ransacked by a curious bear. We'd hear movement in the tree line for the next couple of nights, and it scared the crap out of me. The last night we were there, I had a nightmare that a bear made it to my tent and was licking and biting my feet. I woke up from the dream and shined my watch light into the dirt-covered wrinkly face of an elderly man. He was sucking on my toes, and he immediately exited my tent and took off right after we made eye contact. I still don't know if it was my imagination or not all these years later. I never told anyone, and I have nightmares about it often. When I was a kid between 8 or 9, I used to wake up every night to headlights coming through my bedroom window. The lights would then stop and turn off. Not as if a car drove by, but as if they were being turned off. Then, the long shadows of a man, as if he were looking through my window, would pass by and stop in front of it. I'd lay really still and pretend nothing had happened. Every night for months. Eventually, I convinced myself it was my imagination. Now that I think back, it stopped when my stepdad moved in. My mum was single. But I was convinced it wasn't real. Across the street lived my best friend whose mum was also single, and she refused to sleep in her bedroom. Her window faced my window. She told me years later it was because every night a man would park in her side yard and walk over to my yard. The long shadows were from the light in her yard. She eventually decided it was my dad checking on us and never told me until I was a teenager. It wasn't my dad, I asked him. So I thought I was crazy and hallucinating for years. Perhaps I wasn't, or 2 kids were having odd dreams at the same time every night. I was playing with our dog in the living room. At the time, I was around 9 years old. We were doing our usual only play like this when mum isn't home or she'll tell us to stop kind of playing, so basically playing fetch in the living room. At one point, I threw the toy, which caused it to ricochet out of the living room into the kitchen. Fran, that's our dog name, chased it and disappeared around the corner to get it. At that exact moment, the front door opened and my mum walked in with Fran on a leash after a 2-hour walk over the beach and dunes. I tried to explain, but I can't. I played with him for at least 15 minutes in, apparently, my imagination, but I just don't believe that. I worked at a small retail stop that mostly sold small accessories and clothes. I've never really believed in ghosts, but my co-workers always swore the place was haunted. Lights would flicker randomly and canvases would fall violently to the ground despite my efforts of propping them up so that they didn't. The thing that really made me question everything happened when I was closing alone at night. We had a sunglass display in the middle of the store. Just a flat glass shelf with a bunch of sunglasses laid out nicely on top. I walked to the register and heard this huge crash. I looked back and all of the sunglasses were on the floor. It looked like someone just took their arm and dragged it across the shelf, pushing them all off. There wasn't anything above the display, so nothing could have knocked it off. I don't really have an explanation for that. It was right as I was about to close, too. He was a rude ghost. I dreamed it was dark, raining, and I was in the woods walking towards a campfire. There were 3 men around it whom I'd never seen before. One was wearing a shirt and pants with huge white and black horizontal stripes on them, such as a prisoner might wear. I couldn't figure out why I wasn't scared in my dream. Fast forward 10 months later, we were hunting and camping. A friend brings along 3 of his friends that we'd never met before. I have to go to the bathroom. We'd buried a 50-gallon drum and put a seat on it. My husband walks with me since it's dark. We start back and it starts to rain. We get to the clearing and there's 3 of his friends around the fire, one wearing that white and black outfit I described before. I wasn't afraid in my dream because my husband was behind me and I just couldn't see him. Nobody believes me to this day. What suddenly ended your 5 or more year relationship? Look, unless someone cheats, it's usually not sudden at all. It's a slow, gradual, sometimes subtle change. Eventually one day you sit back and realize, what the frick, this just isn't working out, and hasn't been working out for quite some time, and then you end it. I was with my ex for 10 years. We met when we were in our late teens. We were very much in love and had a great relationship. The last year or so of our relationship, we both began to realize that we as individuals were stunted in our personal developments because we were holding onto a relationship that had lost its spark. People mature a lot in their 20s, and the person you were at 18 is not the person you are at 29. I was dumped after 9 years together, and I was absolutely stunned. I think what was going on was that he stopped loving me, but didn't have the courage to end it and just kept the facade going. One of the most painful moments was realizing I was begging him not to end this, on my knees, pleading with him because I still loved him. I'm still embarrassed about that. It's one of those memories that makes you cringe so badly. It left me somewhat broken. I've put my life back together in terms of a job and whatnot, but there's a part of me that feels like I've been thrown away. And if the person who loved me for that long threw me away so easily, I have a hard time believing that I'm worth someone's love and affection. I think, after a period of time, you just fall into a routine. You've been with each other for so long, it's not as simple as you're just going your separate ways. It's kind of an epiphany that you realize suddenly all the little things have added up. They've changed, you've changed, the dynamics of the relationship have changed. You just have to make the call in the best faith for both parties, and it's not an easy thing to do. You get used to the security, the structure and comfort a relationship brings, and the thoughts of being single again after so long is just terrifying. The security and structure was so big for me. Breaking up wasn't just a decision of, do I want to go on more dates with this guy or not? It was, do I want to end a day-to-day that I'm comfortable with, risk fracturing the friendships we've built as a couple, and spend the next 6 months trying to rid myself of the personal habit of saying we when I mean I? Yeah, it only looks sudden, but to them it's been a slow build-up. They'd try to ignore it and keep doing the actions, but it's still there. Then usually something happens that lets it all out. That seems to be the repeated mantra of the video here. It must be so devastating to the party who gets left out of the blue and isn't the one who's been feeling more of the build-up. I'd guess we're about to get a lot of stories from some pretty heartbroken people here. Oof, I had a kid with her. She was a loser and had no means to support herself, let alone a kid. So I tried to make us a family. I got her a car, paid her car insurance, paid for her phone, and tried everything to make her a functioning member of society. I paid for her school. She lied about going there and failed the first semester. I paid for daycare so she could get a job, and she lost the job and would just spend the day hanging out with friends. Finally, I just said screw it and asked her to be a good mum and take care of our daughter and keep the house nice. I'd come home and our daughter would have a loaded diaper, crying in the living room while her mum was locked in her room, going from show to show on Netflix. I tried everything to make it work. She was crazy and violent to boot. I tried to leave to stay with a friend for the night to let things cool down, and when I finally did get away, I'd get a call from the cops asking me to come back to the apartment because she had called them saying that I hit her. Thankfully, the cops saw through the lies pretty easily, so that never got as bad as it could have. Finally, I had a realization and I snuck my daughter and I out of the house at 2 a.m. to avoid any confrontations and started a new life. She's left the state now and my daughter and me are just fine. We've even added a stepmom and fiancé to boot. I guess it just took 2 years to realize that I could do it myself and people just can't be changed. The sad thing is, she was probably glad you left with your kid too. I knew a girl from college who had a kid. Same kind of person, had a baby freshman year. Then a year later, the father took full custody and she was all, I don't give an F, ain't my problem no more. Then she dropped out with a substance addict. I'm sorry to hear about that though, but I'm glad you're doing better. You sound like a good dad. It wasn't okay for a long time, but I wasn't able to let it go. I still loved him with all my heart and kept telling myself it would get better. I convinced myself that we can overcome and that in the end it will be worth it. It was just so frickin' hard to let go. When we finally broke things off after more than 5 years, it was a relief. I was liberated from the emotional prison I'd put myself into, and I was free to enjoy my life again. It took a few months, almost a year actually, to be over him, but today I can gladly say that life has never been better. Recently broke up with my girlfriend of 9 years. She's a really great person and I'll always love her, but the reason we broke up is because her family took precedence over our relationship. She'd check with her mother with the decisions in our relationship that didn't involve anyone but the two of us. They also never liked me and apparently told her she could do better than me for years behind my back. I never felt like a part of her family, while my family was devastated that we broke up. Ew, F that family. My significant other's family treats me like crap because I saved him from being constantly walked all over by them. He was their Cinderella. He felt obligated to pick up after his entire family. His 50-year-old mother acts like a child. She'll break glass and leave it all over the floor, not feed her animals, and never pays her bills. I really understand a great deal of the in-law tension. Buttholes will continue to be buttholes. We'd been together for over 6 years, living together for 3 of them. Everything was going great, or so I thought. In fact, when he came to me one afternoon and said very seriously, "Can I talk to you about something?" I jokingly said, "What, are you going to break up with me?" Turns out he'd been thinking very seriously about the next step in our relationship. Our friends and family had started pressuring him to propose to me. None of the pressure was coming from me at all. I've always been of the mindset that if we're going to be together forever, then it didn't really matter where the wedding fell on the timeline. Not to mention we couldn't afford the wedding we wanted. Every time he started to think about it, he'd panic and start doubting whether or not he loved me enough to marry me. He spent weeks debating it before deciding that if he was doubting it at all, then it wasn't meant to be. It's one of those things that you should know without a doubt, in his mind. So he broke up with me and moved from our apartment in Manhattan to a neighborhood near his family in Arizona. The moment he got on the plane to Arizona, he realized what a huge mistake he'd made. If he waited until he found a girl that he'd never had a sliver of doubt about, he'd die a very lonely old man. Fortunately for him, I forgave him, and 3 months later, I moved to Arizona to be with him, and we're getting married next year, pending the funds to do so. Just thought I'd add a story with a happy ending here. We were together for almost 10 years, starting in college. It was definitely a slow fade. He was finishing his education and thinking about the next stage of his life. Ultimately, we didn't want the same things, despite talking about the future frequently over the years. We got to a point where I wanted to get married and have kids, and he couldn't tell me enthusiastically that he wanted the same things. It was a long process of realizing that we were better friends and roommates than anything more. Eventually, I broke it off on really good terms. I'm grateful that over a year later, we're still friends. Honestly, for me, it just never really worked at all. The whole relationship was broken almost from the start. It just kept going on because I just kept putting up with it, and being with someone was more important to her than being with the right one. Well, she effed my best friend, and about a year after all of that went down, they got engaged. And he had the cojones to ask me to be a groomsman. Yeah, I just couldn't get along with my wife's boyfriend. I could see that being the death knell in some relationships, although some polyamorous folks seem to do all right with it. I guess it depends whether it's an ongoing, agreed-upon thing, or a bit more of a late-notice FYI. 1 week ago, down to the hour, my boyfriend of over 6 years left me. We had the most incredible relationship. Our friends called us the power couple because we both had awesome, independent lives but loved one another immensely. When he broke up with me, he said that he loves me immensely, but that he's afraid about the future. We're high school sweethearts, and he feels that he hasn't experienced enough of the world to know what he wants or to be emotionally intelligent enough to find it. He said that, at this point in our relationship, we were heading towards marriage, and he just didn't know if that was what he wanted. For me, this came out of nowhere. He'd been telling me since year 2 that he was starting to save for an engagement ring, and I continually told him that I wanted to marry him one day, but not until after our degrees were finished. We had an amazing relationship, and I loved him immensely. I was absolutely blindsided. I know that he's the man for me, but I'm trying to move forward with my life out of respect for his wishes. Everyone should have the opportunity to know themselves before they commit, and I don't want to be with a man who doesn't feel the same conviction towards me as I do towards him, even though I'm in incredible pain right now. I feel like I'm dying. I'll take this moment to give some unsolicited advice. If he does come back, don't act grateful or make it easy. It puts your relationship on the wrong footing, even though you're absolutely certain. One of my friends was in a very similar situation, and it just really throws off the dynamic of a relationship if one partner thinks they can just wander off for a while and then be accepted back with open arms. Most of my long-term relationships lasted largely because one side was putting in more work than the other, to the point that it remained satisfying enough for the less emotionally invested party. Eventually, someone gets tired and realizes just how little the other side is contributing, and the death of that relationship begins. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Mine was fairly sudden. In about a week's time, I realized that this relationship was not going anywhere. It was more of a recovery for her than anything. I loved her, a whole hell of a lot more than I did love even myself. She was my everything, and I did everything to try to get her better. About 3 years of living with her, and 2 years of dating prior, I was certain I was going to marry this girl. When the time was right, of course. Some things led to others, and arguing started. It was always there, but never this much. About 4 months, non-stop arguing about, well, everything. I don't know what happened. I don't know what led to it all, I just know that it happened. I didn't want to think anything of it. I've seen things like this happen a lot, and couples still recover. I thought it would be over soon. Soon. Every frickin' day, I thought, soon. It'll be over soon. Everything will get better, and then I started getting depressed. I started hating myself for not doing better. Everything just started to go wrong. We hadn't slept together for over 3 weeks. We hadn't had a normal conversation in over 2 months. I still loved her. I couldn't let her go. I just couldn't. She was my everything. I didn't know what I'd do without her. But I didn't know what I'd do with her either. Her recovery was still being worked on. She hadn't really recovered from much. Still the constant drinking and smoking, and I realized it was just way too late. This was doing me more harm than good. This girl I loved was slowly killing me. With every drink she took, with every bud she smoked, with every argument we had, she was killing me. I promised myself, to God, to every frickin' body I knew, that I'd get this girl to recover, even if it meant I'd die for it. Turns out, I couldn't. I just couldn't take it anymore. A week's time, that all happened. All that recreation and realization. I told her that I couldn't take it anymore. It broke my heart as much as it did hers, I think. It made me feel numb for months straight. I just stopped talking to her. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing her like that again. I knew she'd still be drinking, smoking, and whatever else was there. I still loved her too much to see it happening before my eyes, so I just stopped talking to her. Stopped seeing her, stopped everything with her. My parents always taught me to never be selfish, to always help others and see my way through everything without causing harm to others. And a tip to everyone listening, there is a time to be selfish, there is a time to be caring too, but make sure one never takes over the other. Age and life experience, or lack thereof, are major factors. I met my ex-wife when we were in high school. We were together almost 10 years. In that time, we grew up. It reached a point where neither of us could grow anymore as people. The relationship became a barrier to us developing in a healthy direction. Breaking up was critical for us. That didn't mean we loved each other any less, we just needed room to grow. When you start a relationship and you're, say, 22, there's a big difference between who you are as a person at 22 and who you are as a person at 27. Life goals change, opinions and viewpoints change, and sometimes you just grow apart. It's not that you dislike the person, you just no longer share the same values. It happens all the time. You know, I wish I knew why mine ended. He left me without explanation, and to this day I have no idea why. It never worked. I was just too much of a pushover to tell her how miserable she was making me. Yeah, that can be the case in a lot of relationships. I feel like especially us guys are quite prone to just dully sticking our heads down and checking out mentally until people break up with us. I've been there. I really hope I'll be smart and brave enough to never let things get to that stage again. My ex and I were together for more than 6 years. He was a great guy, and breaking up with him was one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. Like all the other comments here, I'd felt like we'd grown apart. I tried telling him on several occasions I wanted our relationship to change, and this was why. For the 6 years we were together, we never took a vacation together. He didn't even have a passport. I even went as far as to fill out the form for him, but he always pushed it off to the side. I wanted to travel. I'd spent 3 months with my mum traveling Southeast Asia, and it was the best thing I've ever done, and I wanted to share that with him. but I felt like he was never motivated or expressed interest. He'd tell me he was focusing on our future, and that meant he'd need to focus on his courses during the school year and working full-time in the summer. We also had different friends. This was something I couldn't wrap my head around. His core group of friends had been friends in high school. He grew closer to them since they went to the same university, and they all decked to join a fraternity. I was rarely invited to any parties. I often offered to be their designated driver. What bothered me was that he never wanted to take a trip or vacation with me, but had an annual end-of-spring semester camping trip that I was never invited to. I still had a core group of high school friends I stayed close with. I invited him out every single time I had a dinner or get-together. When he did come out, he was never engaged with my friends. He'd sit back and be occupied with his phone. He'd smile and nod at jokes, but never jumped into a conversation. I knew his friends didn't like someone from my group, but hoped he'd get along with the others. I'd also started a new job and had work friends. I invited him out with my work friends. These friends were all our age, by the way, and he just never came out. I still remember my coworker telling me she'd only ever seen him once when he picked me up. I had school friends. I had a design program that I entered, and they always joked about my imaginary boyfriend, one I'd talk about, but they had yet to meet. During the last couple of years, I had really tried to make things work between us. I tried to approach the topic in different ways, telling him I wanted to travel and filling out the passport for him. I continued to invite him out with my friends, and he just declined. I asked about hanging out with his friends, and it didn't work out. I remember our last Christmas together, he said his friend, that I used to be friends with, had invited him to their family party. They lived 3 blocks from me, and aside from him, had insisted that it was family only. That night was one of the biggest snowstorms. I remembered staying in and heading to bed early. I got a call from a friend in my core group asking me where I was. I told him I was in bed. He told me to get dressed, he's picking me up and driving me to the party. I declined, but he insisted. When I showed up, I remembered the shocked look in my ex's face, in a crowd of his friends, his frat brothers and some of my friends. I said hi and told him I'll be hanging out with my friend because he invited me. I had a great time, played drinking games with his frat bros. Some of my ex's friends even hugged me, saying that they don't see me enough. This bugged me because clearly it wasn't because his friends didn't like me, and that's why he wouldn't invite me to hang out with them. I never knew why. I genuinely had a great time that night. One of his frat bros even hit on me and became extremely apologetic when someone tipped him off that I was dating one of the senior frat bros. That night, my friend that invited me offered to drive me home because of the snow. He offered to drive my ex and his twin, but they both declined and walked instead. I never brought up that night to my ex. I never got mad at him. I just felt disappointed that he didn't invite me, but also felt confident that I was a fun person. In the very end, maybe the last 5 or 6 months of our relationship, I gave up. I stopped inviting my ex. I stopped showing interest in his parties. I began exploring things that I showed my interest in on my own. I went out every Tuesday for cheap movie nights with my friends. My ex and I saw maybe 3 movies together at the start of our relationship. I started going to concerts, attending art shows with new friends. I started going out to dinners and drinks alone with school friends. I took a long weekend trip with some coworkers. I admit I emotionally distanced myself. He'd realized that I was slipping away, but by then it was too late. I became busier and had less time for him. We'd see each other only every couple of weeks. It was only if he stayed over at my house. One day, we both felt it when he hugged me and I was so stiff and physically repulsed. He asked me what was wrong. I said it was something I needed time to think about on my own time. He straight up asked if I still loved him, and without thinking, I just instantly replied, no, and that was it. He said he was walking out of my bedroom door, and if he did that, he wouldn't come back. I didn't stop him. In short, my ex kept me to himself, away from his family and friends, and didn't bother to get along with my family and friends, which made it too easy for us to grow apart. No regrets. I should say the only thing about your decision you should regret was, ironically, your spelling of regret. But I largely agree with you. There's a lot of nice people who dig themselves into a comfortable little rut and don't want to do anything outside of it to make you happy. They can be fine people in their own way, I guess, but I sure as heck wouldn't want to be with one of them. My ex-fiancée cheated, but the end was not sudden. I'd been supporting her and I for about the 3 years prior to us breaking up. She had been working on her undergrad with aspirations for medical school, so I had no problems with supporting her because in my mind it was always for us. We traveled a lot in the last year we were together for interviews for different C-Med schools for her. Eventually, about 6 months prior to the breakup, she got an acceptance letter. That letter was the notable deterioration of our relationship. She started talking down to my family. She stopped saying when we and started saying when I. I confronted her about this and she shrugged it off, saying there was nothing to worry about. She started getting more and more blatant with her disrespect of my family and eventually with talking down to me as well. We had moved out of our house because our lease was up, but we were supposed to move more than 400 miles away to a new city for med school within a month, so we had to move in with her father temporarily while we waited. I quit my job of 5 years. We're talking the kind with full benefits, 401ks and stuff. I did this the week before we were supposed to move. Well, that last week she stayed out all night randomly, 2 nights in a row, and wouldn't answer phone calls from me or her father. The first night she said she fell asleep at a friend's, and the second, we both stayed up until 6:30 a.m. waiting for her, and she finally strolled in, still smelling of booze. She tried to say that she had fallen asleep at a friend's again. I really wanted to believe that. My last day at work, I got a phone call from her mother saying that my ex had just admitted she was cheating on me, and her mum had called me as soon as she found out. I confronted my ex, took back my ring, and have never seen her again. This was 2 years ago, and we'd been together for 5 years. Because I stopped allowing him to push me around and realized just how poorly he treated me, not just at home, but in front of other people and in public. He didn't think he'd done anything wrong, and you can't fix or reason with a person who thinks that putting a weapon to their girlfriend's head is an acceptable reaction to not having a mortgage payment, or not being able to get into your email. Alright, mother truckers, since you have a height advantage over mostly everyone else on the road, what's the nuttiest thing that you've seen someone doing in their car? A lot of racy stuff. Pretty much you name it, I've seen it. For non-adult content, there's a lot of bathroom stuff. Bathrooms can be hard to find in some areas, so it's somewhat understandable, but occasionally you get a surprise. The common thing is a guy just peeing in a bottle. But I've also seen a young woman, the driver, stop her car on a very slowly moving on-ramp. It was like 1 mile per hour due to heavy congestion on the highways it was merging to. Get out, drop her pants to her ankles, and go number 1 on the on-ramp with hundreds of people watching. I saw everything. The second one was similar, but this one just hung her butt out the driver's window and peed into the wind and on her car because we were all doing about 10 miles per hour. Bizarre. I've also seen a man go number 2 while driving. He laid out a newspaper on the bench seat next to him, dropped his pants, hovered his butt over the paper, and let loose. Then he cleaned up, rolled up the soiled paper, and put it in a plastic bag. We were doing about 10 miles per hour at the time. He must have really had to go. A kid in an automatic Honda pretending it was a stick shift. That might have been me. I like to pretend. We stopped at a light and I saw a girl dig in her rear end for like a good 5 seconds, pull her finger out and stare at it, then give it a good whiff and then wipe it off on her shirt. In my FedEx truck, I saw a guy getting roadhead in a 1980s style limousine at a stoplight. The whole thing, the limo, his face, haircut and everything, seemed like it was out of a low-budget adult version of The Wedding Singer. I've seen people doing the deed with all kinds of people and with all types of objects, but nothing beats seeing an older guy sleeping in the driver's seat with presumably the cruise control on and his elderly wife holding the wheel. That one got a nice long air horn from me. Some say she's still driving to this day, unable to reach the brake pedal. An old lady doing 20 under the limit. I passed only to find out that the witch was knitting a gosh darn sweater. Pull over. No, it's a cardigan. Oh god damn you for that. That was actually pretty good. Nice to find a dad joke amidst all of the lewd conduct here. I think we found the silent generation's alternative to being on your phone while driving. Amazing. When I was in junior high school, we were on a field trip and stuck on the bus in traffic. One of the kids whispers to the guys nearby that he thinks a chick is having fun with herself. So we all pile over to the window and we see some chick in a Miata and she just has her hand in her lap. Everyone is disappointed and that kid catches hell for it. Some time passes and then the kid yells out, "I told you so!" So we run over and sure enough her hand was up her skirt and she was going to town. This time, almost the whole bus was pretty much looking over, including the chaperone. Once she figured out what we were looking at, she turned the verbal water hose on us and made us all sit down and face forwards. Then she went back to the front of the bus where the other adults were and started giggling about it. I always found the mental image hilarious of a school bus full of kids with their noses pressed up on the glass, watching a young woman in a sundress casually going knuckles deep without the slightest clue. After that, we spent every bus trip till high school looking into the cabins of passing cars, just in case. I've seen someone getting hand action. I've seen someone choking the chicken. I saw a little anchor-biter dog on the shelf behind the rear seat of the car taking a dump. A car was next to me on the interstate. The driver felt fine about driving right alongside me until the mother fudger's hood came off and hit my windshield, and driver side door. And what did he do? He hit the gas and kept on driving. I know I've seen lots more, especially car accidents where a car is around a pole or flipped upside down and you wonder how the heck they got that way because you're in town, it's 35 miles per hour, and it's too busy to go flying down the road. I was riding in a large truck once. A car full of a family with loads of kids comes rolling by on the freeway. Husband was reading the newspaper, folded open in front of him with both hands on each side of the paper blocking his entire view. Wife reaching over from the passenger seat, steering the car. This was a 16-seat Mormon assault vehicle, or MAV, filled to the brim with children.
Mission Control, this is MAV-4. Blessing unto you, MAV-4, this is Mission Control. Mission Control, we request confirmation. We have reason to suspect we're locked onto an atheist and are requesting permission to open sermon. MAV-4, describe the target vehicle. It's an SUV of some type. It has a Jesus fish with little leggies near the bumper. Does it have any decals? Just one. What kind? It's one of those family decals, like the one on the back of MAV Unit 2, but... Instead of a family, it's a series of apes morphing into man. MAV Unit 4, you may engage target. Permission to open sermon is granted. Give them the good news. Roger that, Roger. We'll give them a lesson they can apply to their daily lives. See you at the bake sale.
My buddy drove a truck across country, and once told me he saw two different guys playing the trumpet while driving. Like this isn't a euphemism, we're talking about the actual brass instrument. I was being overtaken at night on the interstate by a car with the cab light on. Glanced down to see the driver and passenger using sign language. Apparently, deaf people can't communicate in the dark. Who knew? I once drove by an elderly man in a chauffeur's suit driving a Chrysler LeBaron. In the back was a teenager in a tuxedo and a completely undressed elderly woman. I don't know what the F was going on, but it reinforced my opinion that LeBarons are the creepiest vehicle on the road. On another note, I frequently see people doing white snow or whacking the mule. I'm not a trucker, but my uncle is. Once he was driving through a residential area, this was in Germany, and saw over a tall fence a woman in her garden with no underoos under her very short dressing gown. As she bent over to pick something up, he forgot to turn his head back to the road and bumped into a car stopped at a traffic light. No injuries, but the car driver was pretty mad. Also, for me, the best part of the story is that when the cops showed up, he told them everything, and they went to ask the woman if she was really half undressed in her garden. Well, if we don't include the naughty adult stuff, then there was an open briefcase on this one passenger's seat, tablet on the wheel, phone in hand, paperwork everywhere, whilst overtaking me doing 40 to 45 on the A40 into London. Then there's the guy who turned 180 degrees, talking to and shouting at kids in the rear seat while overtaking me doing 56 on the motorway. There's changing clothes while driving, people who played keyboards on their lap, and if we do include the naughty adult stuff, well, numerous roadhead sightings. A couple doing the deed on the passenger seat while someone else is driving. A transvestite drives around the North Circle in London at night, undressed from the waist down, getting the old tickle pickled from the passenger while driving around the Marble Arch. The naughty ones really come and go in waves. You'll see nothing for months, and then lots of sightings, one after the other. Some areas of the UK it's more common than others. Non-naughty ones are getting more common. People are just getting stupider, I guess. If I drove the same truck every day, I'd fit a second dashcam on my side window. Unfortunately, I drive fleet motors and change all the time. I used to be a FedEx driver, so not quite an 18-wheeler truck, but I was still high up in my truck and could see down into other people's cars pretty easily. One morning I'm heading out for the start of my route and I'm in morning rush hour traffic. I come to a stop at a red light, traffic stopped all around me. I glance out of my window, down at the car next to me, and what do I see? A guy eating a bowl of cereal at the wheel of his car. He was holding the bowl in his right hand and steering with his left. When traffic came to a stop, he'd grab the spoon with his left hand and furiously shovel spoonfuls of cereal into his mouth, then go back to steering when the traffic started moving again. I can't believe how many replies I'm getting from people saying that they eat cereal while they drive as well. You people are crazy. Yeah, this is insane. I honestly just thought it was Glenn Howerton and his alter ego Dennis Reynolds who did this, but I did indeed check through the replies to this gentleman's comment, and the literal hundreds of people who eat cereal, and by extrapolation the thousands who do it who don't write online, is absolutely absurd. What are we doing as a species? Driving on northbound I-5 one morning, I glanced over to see a guy flogging his dolphin on his morning commute. Full-on roughen up the suspect, while adult movies played on his phone. And now, of course, my most read comment on the internet is now about some guy twerking his gherkin. Riding through Wisconsin one day, sitting in construction traffic on the I-90, looked to my left to see a woman slouched down with her dress pulled up. She was jiggling mad hard, like gyrating and stuff. When she realized that I was matching speed soon after she finished, she leaned over to me, gave a nervous smile and wave, and tried to get away after I gave her 2 thumbs up. But we were in 2-lane construction traffic. Looks, 6 out of 10. Skill, 10 out of 10. Bonus, she started again 10 minutes later and gave me the bird as she got in front of me. Nobody has ever believed that one. I live in Wisconsin too, and people do some weird stuff while driving. One time on the Beltline in Madison, I saw a girl FaceTiming her girlfriend while driving. The girl's hoo-ha was all up on that little iPhone screen. Once she noticed myself, my girlfriend, and my girlfriend's 2 cousins gawking and laughing amongst ourselves, she flipped the bird and sped off away from us. Not a trucker, but I work in a school, and on the way back from a field trip, a kid pointed out to the whole school bus that the guy in the car next to us at the red light was lighting up a bowl. He looked up at the school bus full of children and then took another hit. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Mine's not as exciting, but I saw a lady with her chest bared. She was changing her clothes, no bra, and gave absolutely no Fs about it. We made eye contact, and I gave her a thumbs up.
Helicopter pilot here. You truckers are very filthy boys.
SR-71 pilot here. You helicopter pilots are very filthy boys as well.
International Space Station resident here. Some of the things I've seen you SR-71 pilots getting up to is disgusting.
A friend of mine is one. He saw this one guy smoking hookah in his car. One seems a bit young to be driving a large truck. I saw a guy doing blow off his dashboard while driving down the freeway. Now, I'm not a trucker, but my father is, and from the ages of 9 to 13 years old, I spent 8 weeks every summer trucking coast to coast with him on the road. And there is no better or worse place to learn about humanity, doing the deed, and how frickin' dangerous it is to drive. We saw everything from mouth stuff to hand stuff to all out doing it, which when you're 12 means you spend a lot of time going back to the bunk hoping your dad doesn't realize you're tickling yourself to the idea of what you just saw. We also saw people doing all variety of activities from eating to reading a book to putting on makeup. Heck, we even saw one set of passengers fighting each other while barreling down the highway doing 80 to their inevitable yet deserved accident. Driving on its own is very dangerous, but add in the vastly casual nature people take to driving, so much so that they'll literally do paperwork while traveling down the road, and now I'm scared every time I hop in a car. But by far the weirdest thing my father and I ever witnessed was when we were going through over some mountain area, the name of which I can't recall, but it was something in the Tennessee area, and we saw a lady cutting up meat. Like we're talking a steak on a cutting board with a butcher knife while driving up a mountain. It was really surreal and bizarre because it was one of those things that was so far from the norm that we didn't realize it would be something we could see. Like we didn't know it was something we didn't know, right? It may seem mundane, but it really stuck with me, and I can recall like every detail about it some 10 years later. I did the deed while driving down a highway in North Carolina. I waited until nobody was around, and she climbed into my lap in a reverse cowgirl position so that she could grab the wheel if needed. Just as I'm starting to bop her head against the visor, a truck merges onto the highway beside us. We were in plain sight. I made eye contact with the trucker for a brief second, and he just gawked. I looked away and let him pass. No one arrived, if you know what I mean. Doing it that way is hard. I hope that trucker mentions me coming up. Okay, more insight from someone who isn't actually a trucker, but when I was in college, I was a call FF and EMT. While driving back to the house one night after a run to the hospital, we noticed a car going conspicuously slow on the highway. Naturally, I slowed the ambulance down when we got next to him. What we saw was a young man with hands on 10 and 2 and his eyes straight ahead, getting his rooster absolutely devoured by a blonde girl whose face I never saw. He looked over at us with this goofy look on his face, so my partner and I gave him the obligatory thumbs up. He took the 10 hand off, returned us a thumbs up, and went back to driving. After a minute or two of cracking up, we sped away. I once saw an entire highway of people driving to Detroit. To Detroit! Can you imagine? One time I saw someone with both hands on the wheel, not texting or talking on a cell phone, paying attention to the road. They weren't even cursing or flipping anybody off. It was just weird. I've seen some stuff, man. People going south of the border on each other, bare butts, women's chests, eggplants, and people doing substances, drinking, and much more. But the oddest one was this. I once saw a man and a woman next to me on the interstate, and she had her bra off and half her skirt raised up. Guy had one hand on the steering wheel and the other on her chesty bit. No kissing, no roadhead or anything like that. The guy was just driving down the road holding a bitty. Never seen anything too unusual, but the amount of people that text and drive is frickin' redonkulous. After about 5 years, you see a lot of stuff. But I think the one that sticks out in my mind, I saw a guy driving with his knees and injecting himself with smack or something that was in a syringe. I'd say, hey, maybe it was insulin, but I'm pretty sure you don't need a belt tourniquet for that. Oh, and did I mention he was undressed? I called the cops. I pulled up next to a guy in a Mercedes. He was attaching a silencer onto the end of a 9mm. He noticed me looking and quickly rolled up the window and drove away rather quickly. Well, you could have at least said hello to Agent 47 since you made eye contact. But honestly, I think seeing that and having them pull up the window is a lot less concerning than seeing it and having them wind the window down. Passing by a small college out in a small town in Georgia, I was stopped at a red light, and the car pulls up beside me with two beautiful women in it. Passenger starts to change clothes and removed her shirt, and she was not wearing undies. So she was completely undressed from the waist up, and then she realized there was a giant truck next to her, and when she looked out and made eye contact with me, she immediately covered her chest and was laughing her butt off that she had accidentally flashed me. I just smiled and waved. I was recently in the cab with a trucker who drank 8 or 9 cans of Heineken at the wheel while driving on the motorway in France. True story. I was once driving out in snowy weather when I see a truck parked with emergency lights on. I exited my car and walked over to see if I could help with something, but when I looked inside I see a middle-aged guy wearing this weird fluffy animal costume while eating literally between 50 to 80 eggs. They were peeled and stuffed in a brown paper bag. But he was just sitting there eating this huge crap ton, of eggs in the middle of nowhere. So I asked if he needed any assistance, and after a long, awkward eye contact of egg eating, he just starts the truck and drives away. To this day, I've never figured out why or how he sat there eating eggs dressed up as an animal. Life is strange in Scandinavia, I guess. Well, here's my totally bullcrap guess. Maybe he was on his way to some sort of furry group whoopee that involved playing with scat. Eggs make the smelliest ones, so maybe he was pre-gaming. I can't believe I typed that out. I was in a high school band and we spent a lot of time on the road going to various competitions. We'd rent 3 of these huge coach buses whenever we went to any competition. Once it was extremely late at night and we apparently got lost in some random town and needed to turn around in a Burger King parking lot. There was a single car in the lot and it didn't take us long to notice that there was a couple doing it in the back seat. They quickly found a blanket and threw it over themselves. Think about the situation from their perspective. Dead quiet, no one around, they get it going and all of a sudden here comes 3 giant buses with kids' faces plastered against the window. Just last week, around 7 in the morning, I passed a woman outside of Cleveland doing 80 and eating a full piece of corn on the cob while driving with her knees. One time I saw a guy shaving with a straight razor while driving. No, seriously, this guy had a mirror affixed to the windshield and had the soap and brush suspended underneath it, with a little bowl of water and a whetstone. My regular run is from northeast to east LA, so roughly 18,000 miles a month. I've seen people whacking the mule, drinking, changing clothes, peeing in bottles, but the one that always sticks out was in Texas. She was obviously drunk and still drinking while driving with a revolver on her dashboard. I slowed down, got her LIC plate, and called it in. One time I saw a guy with a goat in the back of his van, and he was singing into a carrot like a microphone between bites. I saw a guy playing a trombone while driving. It was the weirdest thing ever. I asked my daughter to take a picture for me, but she was only 7 at the time, and the results were not very clear. Weirdest thing I've noticed is that people in New Hampshire seem to all know how to drive. It really threw me through a loop the first time driving up there. My brother was a truck driver, and he said the amount of girls driving, sitting with their legs crossed on a seat under them, on cruise control, was ridiculous. Nothing. I've seen nothing weird in 3 3/4 years of driving a big rig. Disappointed. I saw a dude getting some road action at 3 a.m. and we locked eyes. I gave him a thumbs up and he smiled and drove on. This whole video is just proof that we need self-driving cars, and we need them now. I live in southern Nevada, and I once saw 3 people in the front seat of a pickup truck light up a smack pipe in broad daylight and then get on the freeway. While in Afghanistan, I saw a trucker with a full blazing fire in his cab. The fire was about a foot high from what I could tell. I feel like people who ride public transport buses have the best view into cars. They're just slightly above most vehicles and don't have to pay attention to driving. Standing up on the express bus going down the highway is the best in car people watching. I love seeing people road rage. They have no idea how utterly insane they look. Haha, well now I'm absolutely going to do this. I doubt I'll even see 100th of the crazy crap we've read here today, but you never know. Not a trucker, but I saw a big pickup truck at a stoplight roll down the window and a plume of smoke roll out like it was out of a Stephen King novel. They were hotboxing the truck in traffic. Seeing as some people don't seem to understand what hotboxing is, they were smoking enough Mary J while driving that when they opened the window the plumes of smoke rolled out. It was in fact the good herb because I was behind the person with my window down and the smoke rolled into my car a bit. Driving while you're that hazy is in fact illegal. Was driving in North Carolina and turned onto the road to see a girl mounted on a guy, both in the driver's seat. That looked hard. I doubt anyone finished. My dad saw a chick sitting in the passenger seat using a big old marital aid on herself. He tried to keep up with the car for as long as he could. Back in the 90s, I drove a truck in order to see the country. I was in Houston at about 3 in the morning, and out of the corner of my eye saw a guy pacing me. I looked over and the guy driving was looking straight at me, cranking it like he was churning butter. It was funny. He tried to get me to pull over, but that didn't happen. What ridiculous event made you believe that we live in a simulation? I found a random orange on the street while walking to school. I picked it up and tossed it down a driveway and it landed right up against a car's back tire. When I was walking home, the car backed out of the driveway, and as it drove over the orange, it sprayed all over me. Now that is some Final Destination crap. I drove to the park to go running. I used my cell phone as a GPS. When I was done, I put my phone on the top of my car and spent a few minutes stretching. Then I got in my car and drove home. On the way home, driving about 35 with the window down, I took a turn, and the cell phone slid off the roof of my car and into my open window, bouncing off my arm and landing in my lap. I never told anyone because I just didn't think they'd believe me. In 2007, I read The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. The book inspired me to quit my job and move to Uruguay. En route to Uruguay, I got in line to get my passport stamped, and the guy in line directly in front of me was Tim Ferriss on his way to Uruguay for the first time. I introduced myself and told him his book inspired my life change. We had a nice 3-minute conversation while standing in line. Cool guy. In the middle of making an omelette, I answered the door while holding a whole egg. It turned out to be my new neighbor asking if she could borrow an egg. The look of confusion on her face when I produced one on the spot was only matched by my own. She took it and left without saying a word. It was super weird. You should have reached behind her ear and pulled out the egg magician style. The work I used to do required me to carry a lot of keys. At the end of my shift, every day I'd go and hang up my keys on a cup hook, but as I entered the room I'd toss them over to the board with the hooks, trying to get them to land on the hook. And every day the keys would miss and fall to the floor, I'd retrieve them and hang them and sit and do my paperwork. One day at the end of my shift, I was a bit later than usual and the supervisors were in the room. Again, I tossed my keys and they hooked this time. All of the supervisors were stunned, but my direct supervisor said, "I bet you couldn't ever do that again." I grabbed the keys off the hook, walked over to the door and tossed them again, and again they landed on the hook. And in the 2 years of working there, that was the only 2 times they caught. Main character revealed. Yeah, every now and again we manage a fluke like this out of nowhere and you have to avoid those people for the rest of your life on the off chance that they realize you aren't as cool as they think. Once, when I was on the bench during a football game, I was drinking from a water bottle. For no reason, everyone was looking at me, and I took a swig and then flung it towards the holder which was on the floor about 10 meters away. It did a perfect backflip and then landed in the only spare space on the holder. Everyone looked back at me amazed, and I just shrugged my shoulders and turned away. The key is being as nonchalant about it as possible, even though you're mentally high-fiving yourself. Whilst on honeymoon, I bumped into my best friend from high school in Venice, Italy. I hadn't seen him in 14 years, he lives in Australia, and I live in England. A guy with the same name and same birth date as me died. I was doing a job at the law firm where his will was held on the day of the reading. They freaked out and asked me to confirm a bunch of details to make sure that I hadn't died. I once had a chat with a random stranger on Omegle Video for hours. Parted ways, didn't want to keep in touch, but then bumped into the same person a year later and recognized the person immediately. Once I fell off of my bike and got stung by a bee on the way to the ground. My friend's bank account number is the same as her passport number. Assuming those are both 9-digit codes and all the digits are assigned randomly from the pool of 0 to 9, the probability of that happening is 0.000000001, or 1 in a billion. I was teaching English as a second language in Korea, and we went out one night to a local bar that had a monthly open mic night where a lot of us foreigners would gather. I got chatting with a random white guy at the bar and asked where he was from, and he said, Ottawa. I was like, no way, I used to live in Ottawa. Whereabouts in Ottawa did you live? He answered, Sandy Hill. I once again said, no way, I had a car stolen that was found there. His face went slack. Was it an 88 to 91 Honda Civic? Oh yeah, I think that was me. Let me get you your drinks for the night. I think we were both just stunned. It was so surreal, I didn't even know how to react. It was so long afterwards, not to mention being on the other side of the planet, that I was over being mad. I was more just like, what the frick? He was definitely just as shocked as I was, and very quick to own up to it and said he'd get my drinks for the night. So bizarre. I still just shake my head thinking about it. In short, while traveling in Korea, I met the guy who'd stolen my car 4 years earlier in Ottawa. I once went to get a Gatorade out of a vending machine after PE. I put all of my money in, $1.50, and out came a Gatorade bottle with a shirt in it. It sucked because I was thirsty, and you can't drink a shirt. Once walking out of a grocery store, me and a buddy did that pew-pew-pew finger pistols thing with our hands and said something pretty spaced out to some guy who was about to step into the parking lot, and he stopped for half a second to glare at us. In that half second, some D-bag driver sped by and would have smashed the guy. We all did a double take and went on our merry way. Wow, you shot a man to life. A bird pooped on my head while I was riding a bike, and therefore moving quite fast. And then literally 5 minutes later, after I'd cleaned up, a bird pooped on my head again. When I was a kid, I went to a hockey game with my family. We're sitting there enjoying a game, I was drinking my Sprite and having a good time. My dad turns to me and asks if I want a hot pretzel. Heck yeah, I want a hot pretzel. I took my Sprite bottle with me and we went and got our pretzels. On our way back, we couldn't remember which aisle we were in. My dad said, I think it was 15. No, I said, we're in aisle 16. I believed it with conviction. My dad was like, okay, and we went down aisle 16. We walked down to our row and we were on the wrong side of it. I guess I was wrong. Derp. We were supposed to be in aisle 15. Instead of climbing the stairs and going around everyone else, we were those discourteous D-bags who shuffle their way across the aisle to get to the other side. I held my Sprite bottle by the neck, tight against my stomach, so I could take up less space as I sidled past people. All of a sudden, my pop bottle is gone. It's just missing. There's Sprite everywhere, I'm sticky, and the girl sitting behind me is sticky. Stuff is messy. What the frick? I look on the ground and my Sprite bottle is completely crunched in half. This was back in the days when Sprite bottles were made out of pretty tough plastic too. They didn't give a damn about the environment back then. Earlier, I'd seen people on the ice with slingshots launching balled-up t-shirts into the audience. I thought they were balls for street hockeys at the time, so I assumed I got hit by one of those. So I looked on the ice. There was nobody on the ice at all. What caught my eye was the Jumbotron. I was on the Jumbotron looking like the confused child that I was. So here's what happened. The puck was in play and somehow got shot over the protective glass and into the audience. It hit dead center into my Sprite bottle. Had I not brought the Sprite bottle with me, I would have been hit in the stomach. Had I just listened to my dad and we went down the right aisle, it would have hit the girl I was standing in front of in the face. We remained on the Jumbotron until I reached my seat. We were only a couple of rows behind the visiting team's bench, and the coach called me down afterwards. He gave me their goalie's stick, signed, and congratulated me on my great save. I still have both the stick and the Sprite bottle. The girl I was in front of ended up finding the puck underneath the seat in front of her. It was a good day for us. This is the second post after the orange one to make me think of the Final Destination in regards to the ridiculously situation-specific circumstances with a long, drawn-out setup. Luckily, neither of them ended in death, and this one even got you some cool memorabilia. My parents divorced when I was an infant. My biological father was awful to us in general and an alcoholic amongst his many other issues. So my mother chose to forgo child support in order to actually keep our location a secret. Fast forward 13 years, 15-year-old me boards a plane to California. I live in New York, and I head to a sleepaway camp for a week. At the camp, I start talking to this girl and grow instantly enamored. So the girl and I down almost all of our time together during camp. But she's also there with one of her friends. So on the fourth night, the three of us are sitting around a campfire talking, and I tell them about how I lived with my mum and why. I mentioned the last time we heard with my father, he was living somewhere out west, and that I hadn't seen him since I was a baby. I also mentioned that my mother had just recently gotten remarried to a man we'd been living with for almost 10 years, and that he had adopted me, so I took his last name. Now, this is where stuff gets weird. The girl's friend, let's call her Amanda, asks what my biological father's last name was, so I tell her, and she gets crazy pale. She asks me a ton of questions about him, like what nationality he is, like a mix of Italian, Native American, and African American. Where did he and your mother live? A small town just north of New York City, and a bunch of other very specific stuff. She starts crying and tells me that perfectly describes my father. He moved out here after his first wife left him, and he and my mum had me, got married, and then had my younger brother. I think you're my older brother. And that's how I met my half-sister, who I didn't know existed in a camp of more than 300 kids across an entire continent. In short, met my little sister, who I didn't know existed, in a sleepaway camp on the other side of the country. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was sitting at the lights behind a wee black Vauxhall with a police car behind me. Next thing you know, the police are asking both of us to pull over. We had the same license plate. Turns out that both cars were registered at the same dealership on the same day. A clerical error had led to both of us getting the same plate. Months later, we were both sitting at the same traffic light and the police are there to see it. This happens in Glasgow, Scotland about 10 years ago. Plates are unique in the United Kingdom. The format at the time was LNNNLL, with L being a letter and N being a number. In short, I got pulled over by the police because my car and the car in front of me had the same license plate. Irish guy here. A few years ago, my mates and me met a bunch of girls in a bar one night whilst on a working holiday in Ocean City, Maryland. Great night had by all. Fast forward 12 months, walked into a random bar in Cairns, Australia, and yep, bumped into the exact same girls. When I was at university, I'd quite often get a taxi ride after a night out from a nice old man nicknamed Grandpa. He had Grandpa on his taxi license and had business cards with Grandpa on them. He'd always give you cheap rides and come whenever you called. Anyway, 4 years or so passed without me getting a ride from him, and I'd heard rumours he'd passed away, which was quite saddening. About a month or so ago, a couple of mates and I were waiting to get picked up by a taxi when I decided to tell them about the story of Grandpa. So eventually I finished my story and our taxi arrived, with none other than Grandpa at the wheel. I once stood on a venomous snake by accident, but escaped unhurt because I stood on its head. Once when I was surfing, I stepped on a stingray's head and very narrowly jumped before he whipped his stinger forward to hit me. I felt like Spider-Man the whole day. I do not have a very common name. One day, while reading my local newspaper, I saw a marriage announcement. A person with the same last name as my first name, and a person with the same last name as my last name got married, making their marriage announcement headline my complete name. In the announcement, their wedding was scheduled for my birthday. I won tickets to see SNL the exact weekend I was going to the East Coast to visit my dad. If you don't know how SNL tickets work, you register for their raffle in August, and then they email you 2 weeks prior to the week you got selected to. You have to be 16 or older to attend the show, and that's exactly how old I turned that year. I've never felt luckier. James Franco hosted and Muse was the musical guest. Picked up the phone to call someone only to hear them talking while I dialed their number. They had called me at that exact moment. It was weird. Played a game called Guess the Card and I'll Do the Deed with You. I got it right. She winced and said, double or nothing. I got it right again. I did not get the deed done with. Oh. I was in perfect health at 23 but had a stroke. A pretty harsh one. I was in a coma for 2 days. When I woke up at the 8,000-employee hospital, they told me I was the first guy ever at my age to come down with something like that. They ran me through every test they had for 3 days and concluded I had a blood clot in my leg somehow. Sent me back home, and 3 weeks later it happened again. One time I ate a Kit Kat and it was all chocolate. I got into West Point with a 2.77 high school GPA. Hey, someone's got to bring the average down, right? No, I wasn't a varsity athlete. I did play some sports in high school. I had a 20/30 on the new format SAT. My parents weren't military, but yes, I am white. I ran up the rear end of a taxi twice on the same night. The first time I was going clubbing with mates. He had locked his brakes and I drove straight up the back side. We exchanged details and stuff. And then after the club, we were driving back, and I thought the cab in front of me looked familiar, and he locked his brakes again. So I smashed him again. He gets out and turns paper white. You! Why? Why? Oh boy. I mean, most of us are scared into better driving habits after the first accident. But you were driving that close again in the same night? And the fact that it was the same guy is just a big old chef's kiss from me. I won a Frosted Flakes sweepstakes competition about 10 years ago. I was a kid and my mum filled out the form that was on the back of the box and sent it in, and I ended up winning an all-expenses-paid trip to California, a PlayStation 2, a crap load of money amongst other things. I always thought sweepstakes were a scam and companies never actually followed through, but it turns out there actually are winners. Correctly guessed that there were 30 pearls in a closed oyster. They gave me a ring with a black pearl for winning. I was working a wine banquet back in college on a nice sunny afternoon in a wide open field with no trees. Pretty much everyone was gone and we were wrapping up after a long day. I yawned and the only bird for miles crapped right in my mouth as he flew by, the motherfricker. That and the brain aneurysm that I had, about a 1 in 25,000 chance of surviving, but I'm still here, looking for that goddamn bird. I've been saving a bottle of X-Lax just for him. Core, motherfricker. I won second place in a shop contest for my division, despite being the only one in the division. In a game of cards, I got 2 four-of-a-kind hands in a row. There is around a 1 in 18 million chance of this occurring. I have 2 of the rarest gastrointestinal and gastrovascular diseases known to medical science called supramesenteric artery syndrome and median arcuate ligament syndrome. It's extremely rare to have one of these illnesses, but to be diagnosed with both at the exact same time is near impossible. Yay me. This didn't happen to me, but I'm a train driver here in Sydney, and one night I hit someone who was doing his artwork on a wall of a tunnel at approximately 60 kilometers per hour. He got away without a scratch. I once went fishing as a teenager. I caught something on my line and began eagerly to reel it in, hoping to see a big old fish. To my surprise and confusion, what I found at the end of my hook was another fishing line that had somehow become snagged on my original hook. At the end of the fishing line that I'd caught on my hook, there was a hook. And on that hook there was a big old fish. I still can't really comprehend the odds of that happening, but there it is. Someone had clearly caught this fish at an earlier time, but for whatever reason the line had come off the rod and the fish had gotten away. It would have been less weird if that dumb idiot fish had taken my bait too, but no. I somehow caught the line that held the hook that caught the fish. Wasn't me, but my sister. She was driving to work on a highway. A semi-truck in front of her ran over a big piece of plywood that was on the road. This caused the plywood to go flying right at her vehicle, and it wedged itself under the hood of her car instead of hitting the windshield. You could recreate that event 1,000 times, and I don't think it would work out like that. She was very lucky that day. I had chickenpox, scabies, and pertussis, aka whooping cough, to which I'd been vaccinated, all before I was 10 years old. My mum blamed it on a working girl's kid at my daycare. Just to clarify, my mother never actually formally blamed her, just made a couple of jokes around my family and whatnot. My mother is perfect, shut up! A car I was in got blasted by a bolt of lightning once. It was loud and scary, but sort of cool. I asked for a match in a bar a long time ago, and 2 people from opposite sides of the room each threw a matchbook and I grabbed them both in one grab. I threw an orange at this bully's bike as he rode away after giving us some fairly choice racial slurs and comments about our female parents. The orange bounced once, so perfectly that it dislodged his chain and the bike abruptly stopped and he was thrown off. He stood up a bloody, crying mess, but oh boy, I was a hero. And it was an orange because Florida. I spilt red paint all over my clothes and rolled around in the snow for 15 seconds and stood up and there was literally 0 atoms of paint left on me. I actually inspected my clothes after that and couldn't even find a hue of red on the white expensive clothes. I don't even care if it's true, I just want to know what that thought process was. Oh no, I'm covered in paint, it must come off. Oh look, there's some snow. I shot a bee hovering on a tree trunk about 25 feet away and split it in half using a slingshot while my uncle was watching me try to do it. I was 6 to 8 years old. 2 things. I once met a girl on a small island in Indonesia called Gili Trawangan. It's only 2 kilometers large. 1 year later, I was at Glastonbury Music Festival in amongst 200,000 people and I physically bumped into her. Went to say sorry and realized who it was. Another time I was sitting on the ocean, pushed my hands into the sand below me, and when I pulled my hand out, I had a ring on my finger. A few years back, I was reading the Aragon series on vacation and I finished book 2. I really wanted to get the next one, but I was in a proper tourist trap that mostly sold towels and beach balls. Still, I went down to one of the shops, and next to the postcards and pamphlets was a single copy of book 3. I still can't believe it. I once got 2 fortune cookies, the first had no fortune and the second had 2 in it. My dad was retiring and clearing everything out of his office as he was closing his practice. His favorite picture of my stepmom needed to be removed from the frame so he could have it digitized. Having been in the frame so long, it was sticking to the glass. When the picture finally came off it slipped, fell from however high a 6'3" man would be holding everything to remove it, and fell perfectly into the slit of the shredder, which was on automatic on, and shredded the picture as my dad stood there in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the event that had just taken place and emotional loss of the photograph. What do you think will be the big "cigarettes are bad for us" moment for our generation? I think children's play is being increasingly cut out of schools and early years programming in an attempt to cram in more academic content. The thing is, young children learn more from play, including academic skills, than from classroom settings and flashcards. We're going to see much higher levels of developmental delays and mental health issues over the next few decades unless something changes soon. Living an easy life. I'm not joking, it's becoming evident that our lifestyle, with little meaning or struggle, has caused our depression. It used to be if you toiled in the fields with blood, sweat and tears all day, you put food on the table at the end and you felt successful and happy. Now you just go to a boring job for 8 hours and you can put food on the table and you feel no gratification in having that food, so you have to dream bigger. Now you're not successful unless you have a big house, 5 cars, a successful Instagram or YouTube channel, whatever you decide you want, but the problem is it's all a hell of a lot harder and rarer than just being able to work in the field, where you come home and have a nice meal for the family, so a lot less people will ever have that happiness now. Working the fields at many points and places in history also didn't necessarily mean no time to meditate, contemplate, pray, or shoot the breeze plenty as well. I'd say we underrate the vital importance of that. Truthfully, I wouldn't be surprised if it's pre-workout powders or drinks. Like 7 to 10 years ago when the original Jack 3D came out, I think it's very possible that stuff could have possibly messed up my body more than I suspect. Pre-workouts were basically amphetamines and who knows what else junk. Sleep deprivation. Social media. There's been heavy evidence for a while that it's a contributing factor to the depression and anxiety pandemic, and it definitely contributes to ruining people's lives in various ways. I'm not saying it's all bad, but I feel like society would be better off in many ways if it wasn't such an influence on people. Working 50 to 60-hour weeks and stress is actually really bad for you. It's only getting worse for poor people. The cost of living goes up, real wages keep falling. Single parents working multiple jobs just to make rent. Life is hard, and winter is coming. Yeah, this may seem to fly in the face of that previous point about the ease of living killing us, but I think that first commenter's point can be rephrased into working less physically stimulating jobs in very different environments than we're used to, because most of our easy jobs still don't pay the bills. Smoking wax. I freaking love taking dabs, but I'm pretty sure my generation is going to be the poster children for the "don't smoke wax" movement. Not enough sleep. Former sleep researcher here, this is definitely the answer. We already know the numerous public health implications, not only in lower grades for students, but also more medical errors, more traffic accidents, and the cause of many plane crashes and stuff like that, yet it's still seen as a sign of weakness if you want to sleep a normal amount. Not to mention the lack of sleep messes with your hormones, and can be a factor in obesity, depression, illness, and more. Turns out shielding everyone from risk creates a lower risk acceptance threshold. Most fundamentalist parents don't realize this. Kids that are too shielded from the world can't really function within it. And depending on the kids, you either create rebels with no trust in authority or timid, reluctant little mice who never do anything. I really pray it's not LASIK eye surgery. Tanning. People generally have accepted that excessive UV exposure is bad for you, but I haven't seen this translate into behavioral changes for society as a whole. Greek guy living on an island here. I probably watched tens of thousands of people tanning without sunscreen like there's no tomorrow in our beaches this summer so far. Northern Europeans, Germany, Scandinavia, UK mostly, apparently don't give an F about sunscreen and have no idea what the sun does to you except burn you. Oh, God forbid computer screens, otherwise we are so screwed. Sitting for 8 or more hours a day. My lab used to have a daily notification that told us to stand up and stretch. Quote, sitting is the new smoking. End quote. Butt cancer. Are you driving your own car? But the casualty rates! You're basically killing everyone else in the traffic. I mean, it's already happening, but low-fat products. They're jacked up with sugar and not at all healthy for you. Also, I'm so happy that this war on fat is coming to an end. I literally eat ghee and avocados all day and I lose weight. And to clarify, yes, I know about caloric intake and its role in weight loss. I also know that fat loss doesn't equate to weight loss, and lastly, my comment pertains to food and pharma industry's attack on healthy fats by claiming that eggs and fish are unhealthy, suggesting that people should consume low-fat items which were instead loaded with sugars and definitely not healthy. Avocados all day? You fool. You'll never be able to afford a house. Hearing loss isn't going to kill like cigarettes, but we sure beat the hell out of our ears via headphones or earbuds. I'm 28, I've been playing in bands and using headphones since I was a preteen. I started experiencing tinnitus symptoms on a daily basis this year. I used to not think about loud noise, but being around construction on the street is stressful now, because I can feel when my ears are being abused. We still don't know how to repair inner ear damage, so start wearing earplugs or turning down your music devices now, because if you mess up your hearing, it's only the rest of your life. Just breathing. People are dying from air pollution all the time these days. Antibacterial soaps may actually be making us antibiotic resistant. Good thing I don't wash my hands. Those people who put lemons in their water bottles to detox and end up with acid constantly on their teeth for 8 hours a day. Enjoy your dental bills, idiots. It turns out that filling the ocean with plastic refuse wasn't the smartest thing people in the early 21st century did. Quote from a 22nd century textbook. Also, just plastics in general, at least for foodstuffs, like, packaging, containers, plates. We keep finding out that certain kinds of things in plastic are harmful to us. The answer so far has been to avoid these particular things, but then we just find the next thing that's bad for us. We know that most plastic leaches chemicals when heated up, yet most people still just throw it in the dishwasher. You should check out all the seemingly harmless dollar store items that are loaded with harmful toxins. I believe Vice put the article out. Really disheartening to learn how little health regulations are in place and all the unhinged loopholes that companies use to keep these products on the shelves, especially items that are marketed towards children. If you can't find the article, you should find results in Google if you search for toxicity of dollar store bendy straws. Please don't be garlic bread, please don't be garlic bread, please don't be garlic bread. Turns out your haters can dab back at you. Sugar. I recently started a meal plan that cuts out as much unnecessary sugar as possible. It's insane how addictive that white stuff is. I've given up cigarettes before and that was a cakewalk compared to giving up cookies and biscuits. Over decades, the sugar industry heavily influenced public opinion and paid scientists to blame fat instead of sugar. And it paid off. I really thought this would be earlier, and it should be. We never consumed sugar in the ways we are today, and it's majorly contributed to the obesity epidemic, as well as diabetes and heart disease. It's in literally everything these days. We used to think it was fats in our food, but we've always had fats in our food, and we've never had this much sugar. Smartphones. They mess with your spine massively, and people injure themselves because they weren't paying attention to their surroundings. I'm more concerned that I've given myself brain damage from the number of times I've been reading while lying down and dropped it on my face. The ubiquity of online smut. I've seen some pretty severe addictions that have had major negative consequences and ended relationships. It doesn't feel like a real addiction to people, and they don't consider how much time they're actually spending online watching naughty films or how it affects their relationships and bedroom life. I've met guys who really can't function without it, or who have beaten their eggplants into oblivion and can't feel anything anymore. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the stuff, but moderation is key, people. Putting your entire life online and having it all stored forever. There's going to be an embarrassing digital paper trail for the next generation of MPs, senators, and diplomats. I'd like to think that we'll get to the stage as a species where it won't matter that you made a comment on Twitter about wanting to eat your girlfriend's butt like a snack cake when you were 19, or because you once sent a photo of your chest to a partner, but somehow I doubt it. That crap is going to end at least a couple of political careers before they even begin. If you think about it, it'll just have a desensitizing effect. You'll be like, so what if he likes to motorboat Catholic nuns? The incumbent stimulates his dingle with avocado on toast. Well, you joke, but it seems to happen a lot now. Feels like you can find incriminating gotcha moments for just about every politician under the sun now on Twitter or whatever the kids are using these days. And yes, as predicted, the public's response seems to have mostly been not caring about it anymore. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say smoking green herb. And before you all go after me, look, I smoke the good stuff too. I love it. However, our lungs are made to take in oxygen, nitrogen, and the other elements that make up our atmosphere, and nothing else. And it's better than cigarettes in the sense that it's not drenched in however many chemicals that cigarettes are. However, smoking is smoking. Your lungs are not meant to intake carbon monoxide and ash, and our happy little green rolls are no exception. Look, I know it's from the earth, and that's great. So's tobacco. Smoking anything is not good for you. Now, I hear all you guys typing, nah man, I dab and it's healthy because the stuff in my vape is just concentrate, and there's no carbon monoxide. You're right, but do you think putting what is essentially oil so hot it vaporized in your lungs is a good idea? It sounds like a great way to cook them from the inside out to me. Look, I'm no scientist, I'm just a hippie, but that is my 2 cents. I think edibles are probably the way to go in most cases. I'm an imperfect human though, so I'm gonna go light up now. Peace out. Validation through likes on social media. I feel like it's something that was developed and with no experimentation was let loose to the public too quickly for our species to grasp. What will society be in 20, 50, or 100 years when this generation's children grow up with the pressure of being online since practically birth, and seeing so many people become popular so quickly and consistently? More than any other time in history. That's why it seems like celebrities are dying so often. It's because we're so connected that there's basically so many more people to know about. Just long-term, how will our basic natural psyches evolve because of this? I know there's a lot to unpack here, I just always wonder. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Going on Reddit instead of doing something productive. I got homework to do, but let's check the front page of Reddit. Then see what's on the front of Ask Reddit. Then spiral down and oh my god, it's 10 PM and that assignment is due tomorrow. Crap. Scented toilet paper. Everyone that uses it is going to end up with cancer of the butt. Internet and computer addictions. That's why I actually turn off my internet connection after the page loads. When I need to click a link or go to a new page, I just turn it back on real quick, then turn it off again when the new page loads. Millennials reading articles about millennials, written by millennials to generate ad revenue for baby boomers. iPads for toddlers and young kids. While it's true that there are educational apps, time spent playing with the tablet is time spent away from learning through real-world interaction. There are some studies that suggest that television is best left out until age 2 because the brain needs time to develop. There aren't any long-term tablet or iPad studies that I'm aware of, but I doubt it's beneficial. It's a quick way to entertain a toddler, which is part of the problem. Kids need to learn how to be bored. The alphabet, counting, and reading can wait. The serious and correct answer? Full contact American football. Look, I love football, but I think people looking back in 100 years will think we're savages. It's a brutal sport that's proven to permanently destroy athletes' brains and bodily functions. And yet I cheer them on each week. 8-hour workdays. It doesn't sound like it would be bad for you, but you've got to take into consideration a couple of hours travel time to and from. So 24 hours in a day and 10 hours work-related. Supposed to get 8 hours of sleep. That leaves you with 6 hours of time with your kids, meals, and chores around the house, cooking, cleaning, taking the mutt out. I'm sorry, but this isn't a life-work balance. So when at the top of the list I see not enough sleep, I have to wonder, is it not enough, or not enough of our own time to spend on, yourself, family, that stuff? I seriously would love to have 8 hours of sleep, but I can't ever get it because A, I can't fall asleep when I'm not tired, and B, I find it hard to want to sleep in the hours I have left from the day of pretending, faking, and acting like I give a crap about the things in life that I value only for the output I need to carry on with this vicious routine of wake, work, poop, and sleep. Blue light. Without a doubt. I work in vision research and I can tell you this is no joke. Already, mountains of data showing that blue light is messing up our vision and our circadian rhythm, which leads to a host of serious health issues. The research is relatively new, as the iPhone and the proliferation of smartphone users is only about 10 years old. It's everywhere. But high-energy light from smartphones and tablets in particular, as they emit the highest levels and are held in very close proximity to our faces. We even put them in HMDs and strap them to our faces now. They make iPad mounts for car seats and baby strollers. Myopia is up 40% with Gen Z and misdiagnoses of ADD and ADHD also skyrocketing. Manufacturers know this, and they're trying to engineer a solution as fast as possible, but it's not easy. If you educated most people on the actual dangers, they'd still not put down their phones. I've seen all of the research, it's solid and terrifying, and I'm still typing this message on my Pixel like an idiot. We'll definitely look back on this time and judge ourselves as if we were smoking in front of our kids and giving them cigarettes for their 10th birthday. Gym supplements, like pre-workout. Well, you can pry it from my cold, dead hands when I'm done snorting that crap and praying at the Iron Temple super hard. Student loans. We all thought it was a good idea. Go to college, they said. Work hard, they said. Get a job, they said. Last week, Timmy had his leg amputated because he didn't monitor his diabetes. He never would have had those issues without landing that cushy desk job where he sat on his butt all day. He should have been a welder. Oh wow, we got to our criticism of this through a really indirect route that I can definitely say I didn't see coming. Well done on surprising me for the billionth time, Internet. The people who think that green herb cures everything like some magical pill. If alcohol is going to be legal, I see no reason why Mary J should be illegal. However, I see a big problem with people thinking that it cures everything. Back in the day, they used to think that cigarettes were good for asthma too. Spoiler alert, they're not. Also, I'm sure that a lot of smack addicts feel a lot better when they have a steady stream of smack in their veins. This is what substances do, people. It's how they work. Enjoy yourself, but don't lie to yourself. It's obesity and junk food. Plenty of people are still in denial. The healthy at any size movement, for example, and corporations still pump everything full of sugar. There's big money in keeping people fat. In all seriousness, I think we're playing a game right now as a society where we pretend this is fine. Yes, everyone knows deep down that it isn't, but we're spending decades of our lives very overweight, or obese anyway, and we're getting really sensitive about it too, which is another problem. In about 30 years, we're going to look back and realize we definitely didn't take being fat seriously enough. The mental health cancer that is social media. Give voices to a bunch of folks with no business having a public voice, and watch their mental health go up in flames. I've always thought it could be birth control. I personally take the pill, but messing with hormones intentionally can't be great for you. I mean, I take the pill because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to function during my period weeks. People tell me all the time I'm killing myself, but I guess I'll have to take that risk. Headphones or earbuds. Whenever I use them, I place the volume super high to block out the other noises. Probably will go deaf sooner when I'm older. Mary J. It's way better than cigarettes, booze, or hard substances, but so many people seem to forget that if they smoke, they are putting tar in their lungs. And there hasn't been a whole lot of medical research to fully explore the ill effects, beyond the obvious breathing problems and blockage, from excessive or long-term smoking. Processed meat. It's a Group 1 carcinogen, according to the ACS. Just like cigarettes, lots of people don't want to give it up even though they're aware of the bad effects. In case anyone isn't aware of the carcinogen category system, it's not about intensity but about our level of confidence in the causality. We know that processed meat and smoking are directly linked to increased risks, but they don't increase the risk by the same amount. Another surprising carcinogen in the same category is shift work, as in working a job that requires you to regularly change between working day shifts and working night shifts, like nursing. Turns out loading food with sugar and writing low fat is way worse for the consumer than having a lot of fat. Energy drinks. People slug these things in as a daily habit. They're overpriced, purely chemical flavored, and they haven't been around long enough to really study the long-term health effects. People straight up die from drinking too many in a short period. I think they're the perfect comparison. Yes, and look, I know for frick's sake everything we eat and breathe is a chemical of some sort, it's just a semantic choice that I made. If me saying it was chemical flavored makes you want to get on a high horse, replace the word with astringent or artificial. Let's not nitpick one word and launch it out of context. Sweet baby Jesus. Blue light from screens. It messes with your body in surprising ways. Oh, it's 100% going to be soda. I'm sure someone said that already, but it's totally true. It's advertised ridiculously, celebrities endorse it, and people are saying it's bad, but soon you'll have to be 18 or older just to buy it. Nano additives in our food and skincare products. Omnipresent and immediate access to media is lowering our attention. Spaniels were originally bred to hunt birds, are actually much more intelligent. Design began as a movement, can help developing nations have lower rates. 9 out of 10 unbelievable ways your smartphone is killing you. I mean, it's already opioid painkillers. They were touted as being barely addictive if used properly, but they turned out to be pretty darn addictive, and then you combine that with overprescribing, addiction, and the slippery slope to harder forms of the substances, it's already a major problem and it has been for years and is only now being addressed at all. Plastic, in general. 50% of all plastic on Earth was created in the last 13 years. As we all know, it takes a very long time to biodegrade, and the oceans have state-sized masses floating in them. As population increases, 3D printing and other manufacturing finds new ways to use plastic in place of anything. It will only increase exponentially. Turns out sticking your member in a coconut is bad for you. Turns out CrossFit destroys your body. Alternately, turns out fat isn't that bad for you. Turns out eating steak is destroying the environment. This thread only has me worried about 57 new things so far. Turns out gauges look fudging stupid, especially when the actual hardware is left out, leaving these ugly, dangling loops of ear flash. I have this odd notion that carbon fiber is going to be the next asbestos. You know, I really hope they don't find out that Coca-Cola gives you super diseases or something, because honestly, I'd still drink it. Car exhaust fumes. You go to some cities now and the air quality is so bad you can smell it, you can taste it, and it's killing people. Once we switch over to electric cars, I think we'll look back on this era with the same disdain as smoking in restaurants and cinemas. VR. I really want a Vive, but I have one big reservation. They're basically sensory deprivation headsets. My apartment could be burning down around me and I wouldn't know it until it's too late. I couldn't imagine how someone with kids would ever be able to use it. Not developing vat-grown foods faster and unnecessarily killing animals. That's what the next generation is going to hold over us as a part of their moral superiority. And our easy access to jobs before automation. What was that stat? I'm bullcrapping off the top of my head, but something near that if everyone in the States cut their meat consumption by half, they'd be well under the Paris Climate Agreement guidelines. How do you clap back when people say, "Whoa, you talk, but you're always so quiet"? Sometimes it's better for people to wonder why you didn't say anything than to wonder why you did. It's better to keep your mouth shut and appear stupid than open it and remove all doubt. Wait, you can see me? I've mastered the ability of standing so incredibly still that I become invisible to the eye. Oh, I was raised by librarians. Oh, that's neat. Did you? Shh. Maybe when I'm around you. You're not. If someone says this to you and you're feeling extra petty, catch them one day when they're quiet and say, "Whoa, you're silent? You usually never shut up." Care to join me? Maybe he's just quiet around you because he doesn't really like you. Oh, Mum, she probably doesn't like you either. Not replying is a normal reaction when relationships grow apart. Don't fret it, don't sweat it, don't worry, he spoke. You're not the same people, you're not the same folk. This isn't an action of spiteful design. She just doesn't like you, and that's perfectly fine. Maybe she doesn't like talking to jerks. I'd rather save my social interactions for people I enjoy talking with who don't talk at me. Sometimes people just don't have much to add. It's because whenever you see me, I'm around you. No, I don't talk, I think out loud. If someone starts doing this to you, you should just start using sign language. I only know one sign, but it's recognized internationally. Well, you talk enough for the both of us. There is some incredibly catty and aggressive comeback action going on here, and I kinda love it. Although honestly, I have to wonder how many of these people have actually used these. Case in point, the next answer, which is a film quote. What's your humor setting? 14%. Okay, hotshot, drop that to 9%. Well, you know what they say, quality over quantity. This is especially true with anxiety. You choose words you're absolutely sure you want to say. This isn't a retort, but I've often found that when a social group considers a particular person quiet, it's often because they're not listened to or are spoken over in the group conversation, so they tend to stay quiet. I have a few beautiful friendships with people considered quiet by others simply because I engaged with them and gave them space to reply and listened to them. From that, we realized that we had cool things in common and friendships blossomed from there. People listening to reply, not to hear and engage with what the person was actually saying, is one of our biggest shortcomings as humans. We just don't pay attention sometimes. I just think it's funny how some people can talk so much and say so little. You may talk more, but I say more. If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. Blaise Pascal. A 10-second stare followed by just turning away. I did this to a girl I work with because she said I smile too much. Don't let her stop you. We need more happiness in this world. 25 years ago in high school, I was very unpopular and bullied. Verbally, not physically. Then, one day I was walking down the hall and one of the semi-popular girls smiled at me. It meant so much to me, more than she could ever know. Because up until then I felt pretty worthless, but at least in that moment I was worth smiling at. Ever since then I make sure to smile at people at work when I walk by. Not a creepy, open-mouthed, full teeth-bearing smile, just a friendly one, because you never know whose day or life will be improved. It's been over 20 years and I still think about that girl from time to time. Thank you, girl from school. You made me feel a little less depressed during a very difficult time. I wasn't successful in the making friends department as a kid either, and then a more popular boy on the bus told me my hair looked pretty in 5th grade and it was life-changing. I would personally opt for staring at the person for 5 hours straight. As much as we want to be defensive when people say this, the reason why they point it out is because it makes them feel self-conscious. I've never really said much more than, yeah, I'm pretty reserved sometimes. They learn that's who I am, not a reflection of how I feel around them personally. They see I've confidently owned it and they end up respecting that. I definitely understand the frustration though. It's such an unwelcome shift of attention and sudden pressure. Witty comebacks just read as rude sometimes though, even though their question reads as rude to us. I've always been someone who speaks very succinctly. Why use lot words when few words do trick? And I've learned sometimes people take my lack of talking as like a power move or something, when the truth is I just don't feel like rambling on for a minute when, oh, cool, works just fine. If they say this, just start making noises. Beep, boop, squirk. I wish I could come up with some sarcastic comment on the spot when it happens, like you talk enough for two or because I know how to listen, but in reality I usually just explain that I have a weak voice and I'm not usually heard, therefore get talked over. So I just give up on talking in general for that conversation. I'm also really shy around people I don't know. I have problems with volume control. You say, I know, right? You need to sell it with that amount of enthusiasm and volume. That person will never bug you again. Then go back to being quiet and reserved. Because your extroversion levels are depleted for the next 6 months? Yeah. Better to keep your mouth shut and let people think you're stupid rather than open it and remove all doubt. Mark Twain. Well, unlike you, I know when to shut the frick up. Warning, this is just like splashing a poison potion down. It hurts every living thing in the area. Ugh, that even hurt me. Now how do I say this to my mom? You never talk to me. Wow, you talk? You're always so quiet. Shh, he'll hear us. Followed by a long pause. He'll find us. You could just write I am mute on a piece of paper and convince everyone that it's true too. No, you tell them you're mute and get them to believe it. You say, nobody plans a murder out loud. I can sing! Haha, brilliant, followed by, I hate every chimp I see, from chimpan to chimpanzee. Yeah, I guess I'm just not a chatty person. 9 times out of 10, when someone says that, it isn't a personal attack. They're just trying to make conversation, and they go for the only thing they know about you, that you're quiet, because you never frickin' talk to people, so they can find something to talk about with you. Yeah, my pants feel too tight to talk. Honestly, as childish as it is, I often just stick my tongue out. Eat my eggplant, Karen. Wise words, right? Well, if you have nothing to say, it's better to say nothing at all. I like to save my sweet voice for your mother. Yeah, and? If you actually want to rattle a person without being insanely rude, this might be a good point to stop at. This asks why it's a problem, puts the burden on them to explain, and gives them room to walk off with their tail between their legs. It's been used on me, and it sure shut me up when I was dumb enough to ask someone why they were quiet once. Something along the lines of, empty vessels make the most noise. Yeah, that's one I've heard. An empty pot rattles loudest. Say something once, why say it again? If they get the Talking Heads reference, they're probably okay. You're talking a lot, but you're not saying anything. You're talking a lot, but not saying anything. Ah man, I hate it when people aren't polite. Just keep on staring at them. I just like listening to others talk. It's not like I have anything to chime in with, is my go-to line. Just write on a sign, sorry, I gave my voice so I could have legs. Unlike some people, hint, I don't speak just to hear my own voice. Well, that's incredibly rude and will get you labeled as a jerk. Oh, I can do more than just talk, wink wink. I mean, that'll probably make them go away, so victory? Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. Plato. I've never gotten, wow, you talk. Usually it's people saying, you're always so quiet, why don't you talk? And my reply is always the same. I have nothing to add to the conversation and prefer to listen and observe. I mean, I just go on a long Navy SEAL copy-pasta rant. If you want to convey irritation, I'd just go with, well, if everyone else would just stop talking, you'd hear from me more. This is the perfect question to ask to see how people on the internet don't know how to socially function with people in the real world. The amount of snark here is enough to be labeled undesirable for any sort of social gathering. I'm silently judging you, rather than doing so out loud like you just did. One of us has to listen. Remember, the person probably feels just as uncomfortable with your silence or has concern. It may be an uncomfortable question, but it doesn't usually come from a bad place. Just giving the real answer is probably best. I'm tired, I enjoy listening, I don't know much about the topic, I'm just feeling down, stuff like that. My go-to reply is simply, well, you've never said anything worth replying to until now. Wait, you can see me? I'm the quiet one in all of my friend circles. I like to listen, formulate a thought, and speak when it adds value. I've been in several boisterous work meetings where everyone is trying to get themselves heard, yet I sit there quietly. The meeting organizers always look at me and say, you've been quietly taking this all in. Thoughts? It's kinda cool to have it noticed in a positive way, as most of the time it's taken as offensive from certain circles. I just don't talk to hear my voice. I talk when I have something to say. It's a hard concept, I guess. Listen, we don't have much time, and then you fall silent and eat their family. Yeah, well, I don't waste words. Actually, yeah and well are both wasted words. Wow, you have a brain? You're always so stupid. I only talk to people who actually listen. I don't talk to the gays. Will always get you some sort of reaction depending on your setting, especially if it comes from a quiet person. Wow, you can be quiet? You always talk so much. This isn't really me. This is a recording. The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. You first have to listen to have the wisdom to impart when you share. Silence and direct eye contact. Just nod in acknowledgement. Yeah, I talk, but you should stop. When I finally opened my mouth, the only noise to come out of it was the screech noise the creature from The Thing makes when it's being burnt. I never said another word all night. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I talk when people want to listen. On that note, when in a conversation mid-sentence and I notice no one's listening, I just stop, even in the middle of the word. If it was important to them, they'll ask me to continue. I realized about 17 years ago that people just don't care about what you have to say unless it benefits or concerns them. They might show interest, but usually they're waiting for their turn to talk. I'm not very fun at parties anymore. As a non-talkative person, I've always fantasized about keeping one of those fake Halloween blood capsules in my mouth for just such an occasion, looking my interlocutor straight in the eye while fake blood streams from my mouth and saying something like, "I'm always quiet after devouring my prey." Well, if I ever tell you to run, trust that it isn't small talk. If I talk too much, people might mistake me for you. I got this in a small meeting at work in the conference room. My answer was, I'm a good listener. I wasn't trying to be funny, but everyone laughed. My auntie is pretty self-involved. She asked me once in front of everyone why I was so quiet. Didn't I have anything to say? I just replied that when she's over, all we can hear is you talking about yourself. She laughed, embarrassed, as my mother called out from the other room that was rude. I called back to her that I spoke the truth, and it was rude to eavesdrop. This auntie is slightly less loud now. I have spared you from the dark tongue so far. No more. The harvest is nigh. Weep and be laid low. Well, I got your attention, didn't I? I prefer to save my speech quota for those worth spending it on. Everyone else but you says I talk too much. It totally gaslights them. I'm not quiet, I'm thinking. I only talk to my friends. I haven't spoken a word in 28 years. You just never interested me enough to try speaking. I didn't feel the need to contribute. I just immediately stop talking and stare them down until they leave. I think it's much more funny if they stay at the party and then you're just malevolently glaring at them across the room for the rest of it. And then when they go into other rooms, you're just walking until they're in eye contact like an oblivion guard. Less threatening and more just hilariously awkward. I have very few memories, but one of the few I have is from high school English class. The teacher had the desks separated, so half the class faced the other half. Big walkway in the middle. No idea what we were discussing, but apparently I had input that day. Which is something that never happened. I didn't talk in high school, save for short talks with a couple of kind of friends or conversations with teachers. So the one time I said whatever few words it was I had to say, a jock across the room sat up, puts his phone aside and completely dumbfounded said, "I never heard you talk before." I had no response. I just shrugged and didn't speak again. For the rest of that year, I finally opened up in college. I only speak to improve the silence, followed by prolonged silence. Why waste time say lot word when few word do trick? Kevin Malone. Is the best reply for any question ever. Period. But seriously, it's super annoying. You stopped talking long enough to notice? When you're up to your eyes in crap, it's best to keep your mouth closed. I do talk, just not to you. So you let people respond to you? Wow. Okay, followed by a brief pause while looking right at them, then continue with what you were saying. Wait a second, you hear me? But I'm not even real. I just usually yell, "What?" Then they say it again and I yell, "What?" again. Maybe you should take a leaf out of my book and shut the fudge up. Meanwhile, here I am thinking that hole in your face never stopped making noise. Words just keep coming out of there. It's incredible. Some people, myself included, only contribute when it's a contribution. Or, "That's so original. I've heard that as often as you've heard about your big dumb nose," or another obvious flaw from Maximum Sting. Never speaking to that person again. You don't need that kind of judgment in your life, and they always expect it of you anyway. I never learned anything while I was talking. Oh, it's just because I don't like wasting my time with you. Ignore it and let them get used to it. Best response I ever gave after over a decade of that comment was, my mother always told me it's better to let people think you're stupid than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Clearly no one ever told you that. Well, this video's a hot mess filled with edgelords who don't understand basic human interaction. I was just waiting for you to take a breath. and you never say anything that merits a response. You don't plot a murder and disposal of evidence out loud. People are like NPCs, you only talk to the important ones. Fudge off, fanny face. Well, I'm talking because you finally took a breath. I'm introverted and don't really talk until I get to know a person. I've often heard, "Oh, I thought you were a stuck-up jerk." As a guy who's also introverted, it's weird how years can go by with you barely acknowledging each other. Trust me, you talk enough for the both of us. I'd talk if you shut your mouth once in a while. My name Jeff. If they say, "You're so quiet," you say, "I hunt and slay aliens." That's such bullcrap. Well, do you ever see any aliens? No. Yeah, you're frickin' welcome. Always been taught if I've got nothing nice to say, don't say anything. I have been talking, your slow bandwidth was buffering. Oh, are you still talking? Well, nobody plans a murder out loud. Fudge off, you cunt. Or you do the Australian version and say, "Fack off, you can't," with their accent. No, you're imagining it. You learn more by listening than by speaking. Benjamin Franklin. What? I talk all the time. You're too busy staring at the narcissist pond of your bewitching self to even notice. I'm not. This is a terrible dream. Your brain is imagining what kind of things I'd say to you. That is such a stupid thing to say, I'd probably just go with a scathing look. Me being quiet is more polite. For you. Unlike some people, I don't find it necessary to speak when I don't have something relevant to add to the discussion. I talk plenty, around the people I like. Sometimes the less said, the better. I only talk when I have something useful to say, unlike you. I either toot or just say, whiz off. Cheers. Brevity is the very soul of wit. Because everything up to now was in order. Is this where you spontaneously kick off an 80s-style fight with everyone at the party because somebody implied you were less than rad? Seriously though, if you say one of these to the wrong sort of person, you could get your butt kicked. I've been quiet my whole life. One day out of nowhere, I blurted out a sentence like it was nothing. Wow, you're still a butthole. I was just waiting for you to shut the F up, and it literally took an entire decade. Hey, you should see me in bed. That's what the government wants you to think. Well, you're awfully talkative for someone who never has anything to say. Have you ever been stabbed in the liver? Sure I talk. To my friends, motherfricker. Silently make them uncomfortable. Maybe it's just because I don't fudging like you, Jeff. Hey, shut the fudge up, Andy. You're always such a D-bag. Happy New Year. I mean, I only really talk when I'm not thinking about doing the deed with your mum. My friend actually got me a shirt that says, "If you can't be kind, be quiet." I might just start pointing to that. An old friend of mine at a party said, "You're so quiet, man. I've always been quiet." True. And then we ended up talking about games. Most of the time it's not meant as a jab, they're just not used to it. Well, you won't believe this, but I can listen too. I was just waiting for you to pause for air. Wow, you can be silent? You're always so loud. Only if appropriate, of course. A cold, hard stare works wonders. I unhinge my jaw and flap my serpent tongue wildly. Bonus points if I add a peace sign under my chin. Wow, you listen? Who knew? Bosses just sit back and listen. Sod off is my stock response. Haha, I know, but it's okay. Get lost, and then just add your favorite word for male anatomy. Eyes widen. You can see me? Well, there's a reason why we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. This fudging hole is for truths, not bullcrap. Start counting down from 10, while reaching into your pocket. I learn a lot more when I'm not the one talking. I'm quiet because I like to think before I speak. You talk a lot for someone who never says anything. Your mum. Well, indeed I do, my friend, and that's just one of my many hidden talents. Empty cans make the most noise. When did you see something definitely not meant for your eyes? I have the same first name as the CFO of my former employer. The CEO was not very technically savvy and emailed me confidential company documents more than once. And now you're working for their competitors, which mysteriously crushed them, right? It's a foolproof win, and the CEO is luckily a fool. When I was younger, I was at a friend's house, sleeping over playing video games on the Nintendo 64. We wanted a late-night snack and went downstairs to get some cookies, and we saw his mum with another man kissing. I wasn't sure if it got to another point. They were doing that in the lounge. My friend cried and said, "You're not my dad," and sadly, this was the last time I spoke to him because he had to move away with his father. I teach high school. While I was taking attendance at the beginning of a Zoom class a few months ago, one of the girls in the class was clearly video chatting with her boyfriend on the side, because she lifted up her shirt for him and flashed the whole class. That made for an awkward communication to her parents. What do you mean that made for an awkward communication with them? So how's she doing with the course? How's her performance? Well, she definitely knows how to interact during online sessions. Well, that's great. But when I was 7, I was playing hide-and-go-seek with my cousins at my grandma's house. I hid in the wicker laundry basket with the lid closed. I could see through the gaps in the wicker. My grandma walked in, sat down, and bombed that toilet. The noises, the smell, my grandma's hoo-ha. I won the game, but I lost my innocence. Nothing like I've read from the rest of you so far, but one time, right after turning 21, my dad took me to one of his friend's new bar, and we were drinking and having fun. I realized at one point I lost my dad, so I went looking for him. I find him in the back room. He's with one of my friends that works in the kitchen at the restaurant we all work at together, and my dad is instantly like, "Get out of here, don't look, just go." It took me a couple of years to realize they were doing lines off the pinball machine. I'd be relieved if they were just doing lines, to be honest. I think we were all expecting to meet your future stepdad. Ha ha ha, I would be so curious to know if this event was ever revisited in your future. I can't see the rest of your visits home being remotely the same otherwise. Then again, some people are remarkable at brushing things under the rug. This happened years ago while a freshman in college. I walked in on a black market plastic surgery, hanging out with a buddy from middle school. They were shady about only staying in his room and entering through his back door and being quiet. We were leaving and I turned down the wrong hall to his kitchen, and there was a doctor and assistants in scrubs. Tubes, machines, and plastic wrap everywhere. I was ushered out, screamed at, and told not to talk about it. It was either a lipo or tummy tuck. The doc only did those and Botox. It was in a low middle-class neighborhood, happened in Houston, Texas, while visiting our family and friends. Later learned the doctor got caught transporting substances and only did weight loss stuff and discount diagnosis for the poor. I went to pay off a ticket I got while driving with my headlights turned off. I walked into the courthouse office I was supposed to be in and looked through the glass to see the elected male sheriff giving the female magistrate a back and shoulder rub. They both went white when I knocked on the glass. The sheriff immediately stopped and walked to another room. The magistrate gave me the weirdest look and said, "I guess Christmas came early for you," and Stamp gave me the receipt of the voided ticket. Sometimes it pays to see something you're not supposed to see. My parents hooked the home camera up to the TV. I saw about 10 seconds of my mother reverse straddling my father. Didn't feel like finishing my drawing at all after that. I just walked out of the room and sighed with childhood hatred. Ah, childhood hatred. I feel that on a deep level. Grandpa's naughty movie stash. After he passed away in the hospital, I went straight to his room and purged it. You're a true bro. Bro move. Purging the stash, the delete my search history of the 20th century. I needed a USB drive at work one day and asked one of my co-workers if I could borrow one. It didn't work though. For some reason, files wouldn't transfer to it. I started looking around for clues and found an absolutely massive adult movie collection on there. The co-worker was looking over my shoulder the whole time, and the only thing I could think of to say was, interesting. I found my mum's self-deletion plan. She had a small notepad that she kept in her dresser drawer. It had her planning on trying to make it look like an accident so my dad could collect the insurance money. She almost even went through with it one day, but from my understanding my brother unexpectedly came home early and she never went through with it. My mum's old friend came over. She said I looked just like her daughter and then spent about 10 minutes scrolling through her camera roll with me to find a picture of her. In the process, I saw like 2 or 3 eggplant pics. She was a bit embarrassed but just said, "I'm sure you've seen one of those before. Sorry." I assured her it was fine. Honestly, by the looks of the members, I was more concerned for her. I was living with my girlfriend and her parents. One day I ran down the stairs real quick to use the bathroom to see her parents getting down and dirty under the blanket on the couch. I just ran past them. I used the bathroom and came out to her dad waiting in the kitchen. Most awkward moment I've had when it comes to parents. I'll trade you. I barged into my parents' bedroom into seeing my mom going to town on my dad. Awkward as hell. Had to go to a family reunion that day, 45 minutes away. I was near them both all day. To this day, I'm not sure if they saw me. I was just cranking it before work one day in my room with my earphones on. I saw movement in the corner of my eye over besides my door. It was my dad. He'd walked in to see me fully undressed and beating my hog and then nipped the F out. He gave me a lift to work that day in almost complete silence. My parents' bedroom tape. They put it at the end of one of our family home videos, for frick's sake. To my horror, I was showing my boyfriend at the time our home videos so he could see me as a baby. So the video cuts, goes to fuzzy grey for a minute, and then cuts straight to my 80s mum on the couch having fun with herself, and then I saw my dad pull out his meat while smiling at the camera before I could rush to turn the TV off. Forever burned into my brain. I saw one really weird message and then got sucked into reading a whole huge text chain of my dad's really disgusting graphic text messages with his girlfriend, wherein he refers to her by the very same specific and highly personalized nickname that he's referred to me as since I was a child. It was like a train wreck. I couldn't look away. The messages had a really strong and very particularly family-oriented bedroom interest thing going as well, and I've never recovered. It seems he refers to her by that nickname whenever they're feeling in the mood. The nickname is a reference to a misprint on my soccer jersey from middle school. I haven't told anyone in my life about this because what do you even do about that? I've racked my brain 1,000,000 times over to try and make myself even slightly less grossed out, but I only ever feel more upset. It seems most likely that they do some kind of roleplay wherein she roleplays as me, while being with my dad. I have no idea why else using that nickname for their bedroom life would ever be a thing. So I'm traumatized and haven't looked at my dad the same way since, but sure as hell don't want to ask him about it. And to everyone trying to educate me about special bedroom interests, I'm plenty aware and no, it doesn't make me feel any better. To those upset about privacy, he asked me to set up his iPad and texts started flooding in. Once I started reading, my fears were confirmed. I read several of their conversations from over 2 years ago. I skimmed over a lot and read some things specifically. I was trying to rationalize that I was mistaken and that I wasn't seeing what I was seeing, but I couldn't look away. It felt like I had to keep reading to try and find some explanation or make it less real. In all honesty, I don't feel bad about violating his privacy given the circumstances. And to those saying, at least he never acted out any of that stuff on you, many of his other parenting actions that I haven't brought up before caused me suffering, removed opportunities, and led to mental health issues. But you're right, he never did that. What a frickin' hero. Living out in the country, when I was 10 years old, my parents went to the local video rental place and bought back a few VHS. They told me to pop in Planet of the Apes. I did, and whoever had it before didn't rewind it and it started mid-video. And all you heard was moaning, and all I saw was an eyeful of men's and women's naughty bits. My parents freaked out and ran to turn off the TV. Apparently, the store doubled as an adult video store, and they'd accidentally grabbed Playmate of the Apes. Oh no. Oh no. That really is like something straight out of a sitcom, albeit one where you couldn't show what was on the screen while the child stared wide-eyed. I hope your parents were ultra-conservative Christians because that would make it even funnier. Who knows, they might have popped it in after you went to bed. My brother and I were very curious children. One day he pulled me into our spare bathroom, all excited because he'd found a huge surprise in the garbage can beside the toilet. Inside was a tortilla chip bag with a whole bunch of rolled up things inside. We opened it thinking they were surprise toys. Nope, they were my mum's bloody pads.
These chips already have salsa on them.
Oh, you are the worst person in the world for writing that. Yesterday, my dog was barking while I was FaceTiming a friend. I went out to the gate and peeped through the handhole to see my next-door neighbor taking a leak on the land between our places. I saw his eggplant and then he was looking me in the eye and said, "It's okay, buddy," which is my dog's name. So yesterday I saw my next-door neighbor's eggplant and then held eye contact for a second. I was definitely not supposed to see my former boss railing the woman from the housekeeping agency. I was also not due the 35% raise that came my way the following month, but hey! You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A rather adult message from my dad, clearly meant for my mum. Also, unfortunately, my dad's sausage. Thankfully not in person, he just didn't delete his photos before giving 12-year-old me his old phone. Full story, when I was young, I'd say about 12 or 13, I got a text from what looked like an unknown number. There was no name popping up with it. It was clearly from a man. It said something along the lines of, "I'm just sitting here playing with my equipment, wondering if women play with theirs." Stuff like that. It was gross to young me. I thought nothing of it, kept it to myself because I didn't want to feel embarrassed showing somebody it. A couple of minutes later, I received a text from my mum saying that text my dad sent me was meant for her and to not tell anyone. If she'd just shut up, I wouldn't know that my dad accidentally messaged me instead of my mother. My dad never acknowledged to me that he had messed up, and it never got brought up again. When I was 7 or 8, I watched my 70-year-old neighbor have a heart attack and drop to the ground, face completely blue, with his eyes rolling into the back of his head. About a meter away from me, I had to run and get an adult to call an ambulance. I'm positive I saw him momentarily die, but the paramedics did manage to bring him back. No child should have to see that, it's messed up. I watched my grandpa having a heart attack and die in front of me, on Christmas Day, when I was 10, while we were opening presents. The one he didn't get to open was the one I got him. My ex's Reddit, where he was asking for relationship advice. Oh my god, that's my greatest fear. In elementary school, I saw my teacher peeing on a bucket in our class storage. Don't ask why she didn't use the bathroom. And no, she's not old. Borrowed my now ex-husband's laptop one evening while I was at home, and he was out with friends. Browser was open to his Gmail account, including an ongoing Gchat with his mistress. He must have been chatting with her from his phone, because their conversation continued on the screen as I looked on in horror. I scrolled back through the previous several weeks of their chat. He mentioned having a wife. He sent her downstairs pics. So many downstairs pics. He gushed over his feelings for her, but she mostly seemed to want to hit him up for money. Divorced now, thankfully. Good riddance to bad rubbish. When I was about 11, I found my mum's diaries and I read them. I found one from when she was pregnant with me and was seriously contemplating giving me up for adoption. Then one from several years later where she wondered if she made the right choice. I did just want to clarify a few things. We always had a strained relationship. I'd describe our relationship now as superficial. She reminds me of a teenager and I've taken on the adult role. I think she has deep-seated control issues. I'm doing my best to break the cycle. If anyone has resources about overcoming this, I would welcome them. I'm a med student and I had the privilege of taking practices in the rural area outside the city. One morning, the bus driver climbed inside the vehicle and someone came in and shot him 6 times. He died on the spot from blood loss. One bullet pierced his aorta. The killer looked right at me and seemed to contemplate getting rid of the witness. I was afraid of coming to my university for the rest of the year. Rest in peace, Mr. Bayron. You were the quickest and coolest bus driver I've ever met. When I was around 10 years old, my mum and I went to visit an aunt and uncle. My aunt told me to go call for my cousin to eat dinner. I opened the door and saw weapons lining the bed, bricks of white snow, and big burlap sacks full of green herb. I blurted out, "Your mum said come eat," and slammed the door shut. He scolded me for not knocking. It was no secret in our family what business they were in. My mum and her male friend doing the deed in our barn when I was 9 years old. After that, our parents divorced and never spoke again. I'm now 37. My wife's stepmom dated a guy who shared my name. She sent a chesty picture to the wrong contact. She was around 60 at the time. I deleted it and got a new phone and number. I created a perfect excuse for us to never speak of it, but I still haven't drunk enough to forget it. A few years ago, a cousin of a female friend got back from Afghanistan, recently discharged. We were playing Magic the Gathering via Skype. Mike said, "I'm going to go get another beer," and left the camera. A few minutes later he returned, pulled out a Glock, saluted, and ended things right there on camera. Chaos followed. He hurt his cousin on purpose as a last act. F you, Mike, but rest in peace. My mum did smack multiple times and passed out while I was under 7. Walked into the bathroom to see my elderly nana and her old lady bits. My sister having fun times with her partner. Bad times, 0 out of 10 would not recommend. My god, the ladies in your house have got to get their crap together. A weapon pulled on someone's head over a shoe that was left at another man's house. There is some important context missing here, because if the victim was borrowing shoes from their flatmate without permission and leaving them, I've absolutely seen flatmates get furious over much more trivial crap than that. My dad gave me his phone to order something because mine was out of battery. The first tab I saw on Google was, "How to tell your child a loved one is dying." My mum has been ill for years and I'd been in denial. This finally broke me. The CFO left paperwork on the printer that indicated the director-level employees were getting a 100k bonus and making 150k, 3 times the managers at my company. We were laying people off while these sacks of crap were getting paid big time. A text from my wife to someone else saying, "I can't wait to feel every inch of you deep inside me. Divorce is going okay." I once walked in on my dad singing Go-Go Power Rangers with a red Power Ranger suit on. He actually just got married to the girl in the group who dressed up as the pink Power Ranger. When applying for an internship, I accidentally got CC'd on an email from the CEO to her second-in-command asking if they could assign a certain person to be my supervisor, even though she was on her way out. That person did in fact become my supervisor for the semester, and I was on my guard, knowing that they didn't trust her. She left a few months after I did. When I was about 9 years old, I sat in my mum's car at a T-junction. A woman walked out onto the path with a pushchair and didn't see a cyclist coming. He swerved, flew off the bike and landed in the road just as a lorry drove by and ran straight over his head. My mum tried to shield my eyes, but it was too late. I remember the woman's screams and the blood on the road. We spent the whole night on the sofa under a duvet. I had nightmares for years. I should talk to my mum about that. We've never discussed it. In the 7th grade, I was walking out of the locker room. I heard the girls' locker room door open and looked over to see one of those girls walk out. We made normal eye contact, but in the corner of my eye I saw one of my classmates with her pants down. Needless to say, I worked hard to consciously not look that direction again. You know, I'm gonna go with my grandmother's vibrating marital aid. My wife sleeping clothed with another guy in our bed on New Year's Eve. To get a little more in depth, since there's so much interest, I was working a door shift at a bar that night. I got no texts throughout the evening from her saying Happy New Year, so when I got home I was walking down the stairs to our part of the house and I noticed the TV was on. So I'm like, what the frick? Is she still awake? And our bedroom light's on too. I walk over and see her and this guy passed out on the bed fully clothed, but all of the sheets had been removed. I yelled, "What the F?" and they both jolted up. All I remember saying is, "Get the F out of my house." "No, you're not putting your shoes on, get the F out," to the guy. I grabbed his backpack and whatever else he had and threw it out the front door into our driveway. My wife and I didn't really say much that night. She left 10 minutes later to stay at the hotel she worked at. Also, that guy worked there. Soon she moved into that same hotel after we broke up. We tried to work things out for a little bit, but the fact that she became an alcoholic and had always had a really mean bullying streak in the past was just enough. Fast forward, I've been in a super healthy relationship for 4 years, and she's been to rehab. Then she moved to a different state and became a crystal head and was arrested 5 times. In the 7th grade, we had co-ed physical education. When I sat down in the next class, I noticed the girl next to me was unbuttoning her shirt in class. She'd gotten the 2 side buttons out of order after PE and was fixing it. I saw her underclothes and a little bit of skin, but that was pretty exciting in the 7th grade, and she became a lot cuter and daring in my eyes. Nah, she married the guy who took her to high school prom. He's now a fundamentalist preacher, and she's probably 100 pounds heavier. I wonder what happened, and if she thinks about it. Oh Lord, where do I start? My 72-year-old grandma getting out of the shower with no towel. I was 6, and it gave me nightmares. My mum's chest because she enjoys taking her brassiere off through her tank top armhole, but her chest doesn't always stay inside the torso of that same top. And my dad's eggplant when I was 7 because he showers with the curtain open like an absolute psychopath. And a surgeon with his hand in my stomach. When I was young, maybe 6 to 8, I was at my grandparents' house. I was talking with my grandma and said, "I wonder if there's a website named after me." She was just as curious as me, so we went to look it up. I typed in my name, then .com, and to both of our horrors, it was an adult website.
I saw Mrs. Crabapple and Principal Skinner in the closet making babies, and I saw one of the babies, and then the baby looked at me.
My ex-boyfriend wanted to show me something online, but accidentally opened a tab for a site selling engagement rings. He was embarrassed, and I thought that it was sweet, even if it was a bit soon. I watched my father perform the helicopter at my mother through a mirror. meaning I witnessed his pasty white butt and wrinkly gremlin sausage. My ex cheating on me. I woke up early and saw her photo light up. I thought it was my phone. I didn't have my glasses on, and sure enough, bam, Bumble and Tinder were open and sending her notifications. Later, I said when she got up, "So, who's Mark?" Her face fell. I shouldn't have looked, but it made sense as to her secrecy. Health inspectors. What's the worst thing you've ever found in a restaurant or shop? I once finished up a foodborne illness investigation, not finding much that could have caused the illness, so I left. I parked my car on the other side of the street in full view of the restaurant I was just at. I watched the dishwasher come out the back door, light a cigarette, smoke for a minute, then hunch over and frickin' hurl all over the grass. Then he took another drag and went back inside. I have mild emetophobia, so I got a bit of a cold sweat and then ran across the street and basically dragged him outside. I've got a lot of stories, but that was the worst for me. I was a health inspector long ago. Was at a Golden Corral, going through the kitchen area. As I was squatting down to check a dishwasher, my foot broke through the tile floor and into a sewer pipe that ran underneath. Cockroaches came boiling out of the hole. Turns out the entire floor was rotten from a water leak in the sewer pipe. Best or worst part? The general manager tried to fight me when I told them they had to close down until they fixed the open hole into a pipe full of cockroaches and waste. In the mid-80s, I managed a pizza delivery store, and the health inspector came by kind of late and asked me to step outside. He started apologizing, but it was his job to follow up when they have a specific complaint concerning food safety. But this one was odd. He proceeded to tell me that a customer complained that while they were in the store, 2 male workers did the deed on the counter and didn't even wash their hands. I very dryly responded that couldn't have happened, as we always wash our hands after doing that on the cutting table. With a small grin, he said that's what he thought, and he appreciated our efforts. He was our inspector for several years after that. A 14-inch border of mold and dirt scum all around the edge of the restaurant. Boxes that had 5-year-old shipping labels blocking the path to the mops and mop buckets and mop sink. No sanitizer buckets, no sanitizer cloths. No sanitizer, period. Mold in the fans blowing over open food in the cooler. I didn't even bother finishing the inspection, I just shut them down. I used to work on my own as a baker in a supermarket, and the cleaners would come at 10 p.m. in the night when the last worker left, and he'd be finished by 2 a.m. when I arrived. Well, one day I was half an hour early and I walked into my department, and the cleaner was mopping the prep tables and the equipment with the same water he'd used to clean the floor. I wish I was joking. To use the mop on the tables to begin with is stupid, but using the same water as well? Insane. I told his boss when he came in because I simply had to, and his face was a picture. He didn't believe me until I got him to have a look on the CCTV. Oh, and I forgot, he wasn't even supposed to touch the machinery. That was my job. So he was dirtying my already clean equipment. Poor guy, getting reprimanded for going above and beyond the call of duty to make his employers happy, and he ends up getting ratted out anyway. Rest in peace, you enthusiastic but deluded soul. Not an inspector, but my significant other told me about what happened at a popular seafood restaurant in my town. A guy working the fry station had a magnetic kitchen timer above the fryer stuck to the hood vent above. One day, the timer fell into the hot grease. They managed to fish out the main plastic part, but the batteries were nowhere to be found. It was determined that the batteries must have disintegrated into the grease. Being a seafood restaurant in the south, half the menu is fried. The owner is too much of a skinflint to stop serving fried food and change out the grease during the dinner rush, so whoever ate catfish that night had it fried in a tangy, alkaline grease. Health inspector here. Here are my top 3. First, an old liquor store, which had once been the front unit of a housing duplex, which had now converted into a full-service deli. We're talking sandwiches, fried chicken, stuff like that. They did this without plan review, so they were severely lacking in all the proper space and equipment. What I observed was rat infestation, droppings everywhere in the place, mountains of old cast-off equipment in the back, giving the rats a home, meat defrosting on the hood of an inoperable car in the side alley. The back unit of the duplex, now converted to food storage, had unfinished wooden boards on the floor, which were now soft and rotten from soaking up years of meat juice and everything else. Then there was the time I was inspecting a Chinese buffet. I noted to the employees that there were tubs of frozen fried shrimp stacked on top of one another without covers, so they needed to discard the top layers of the food and put on the tub lids. As they scrambled to do so, they knocked over the tower of shrimp, spilling it everywhere. As I was standing there, they hurriedly started scooping the shrimp off the floor and back into the tubs. Like, I'm standing right here, you guys. A guy ordered commercial sausage-making equipment delivered to his private home. The manufacturer got suspicious and tipped off the health department. Turns out the guy would go hunting all sorts of exotic game meat without permits, process them into sausages in his rat-infested garage, there were droppings the size of jelly beans in there, and he was selling his sausages to the public. Don't buy from home cooks, folks. High-end Thai restaurant in the popular tourist area. Go downstairs to the kitchen and open up their freezer. On the top shelf of the freezer, they're storing loose beef, pork, and chicken in 3 separate piles. The meats are not in any containers. They're all sitting on a large piece of cardboard that the restaurant had placed on the bottom of the shelf. We poke the cardboard and our finger goes right through it. The juices from the 3 meats had turned the cardboard into pulp. We then notice it dripping from the combined sludge of chicken, pork, and beef blood. From the looks of the cardboard, it had been dripping for a while. We look to the shelf below to see the results of the drip. Underneath the meats, in the shelf second from the top, the restaurant was storing 3 buckets of ice cream, without lids, directly under the meat drip. We look inside the ice cream containers and see congealed, partially frozen, cardboard-laced raw meat drippings pooled in the center of each tub of ice cream. Oh. None of the ice creams were more than halfway full. We ask the kitchen manager how long they've been storing their items like this. He doesn't remember. At least a few months. My theory is because the place was A, a nice restaurant, and B, an ethnic restaurant, patrons were less likely to complain about the odd flavors. For example, instead of complaining about blood in the ice cream, they were wondering out loud if the taste is star anise. That's one of the few inspections that made me feel physically ill. The place still got an A because the restaurant grade system in my city is about as effective as the TSA. One time I saw 2 cat-sized rats procreating in the window of a Chinatown restaurant in New York City. The place had an A and was right next to a police station. The cops were also watching, shining their flashlights at them, but the rats just kept on going. It was inspiring, really. So this is from the other side, but quite unique. A long time ago, while I was in college, I used to maintain aquariums. Quite a few were in restaurants. There was an old-school seafood restaurant that had tons of tanks. Great customers and a cool place. I'd be out there at least once a week for half a day making everything spotless. This was before cell phones, you youngsters. I was in class and my pager, yes, my pager, was blowing up from their number. I call and one of the Mexican staff picks up and all I could gather is, "Please, Mr. Fishman, you come now, very big problem, emergencia." I head out there and there are health inspectors on site. So, for all the tanks I care for, if a fish dies, I ask the owner to put it in a bag and freeze it so I can take a look and see if I can figure out why it kicked the bucket. Well, one of their very old and very large and pretty beat-up blue tangs, Dory, had died and they had frozen it per my instructions. The inspectors had shown up to this seafood restaurant and first thing they saw was this decrepit old fish that had been munched on by the other fish in the tank alongside the catch of the day. It was before opening, and only the Mexican staff were there who had no idea how to explain it. I got it sorted out, but it was pretty funny. Oh no. As good as it seems you were at your job, I think you narrowly avoided getting the entire place shut down for serving the aquarium's exotic fish for customers. Some would call that being thrifty, others would call it shockingly disgusting. It's all about perspective, I guess. A tuna canning plant in Los Angeles was off of Terminal Island. The processing plant owned the entire island a few miles offshore. Needless to say, had to take a boat to the plant to look at some machinery that they needed repaired. We got to the plant and there were dozens of cats. Inside the plant, outside the plant, in the warehouses, everywhere. Nobody said anything. They were even in the office building. After a few trips, I finally asked, and one guy said in a joke, "Look, it's either rats or cats. We don't have a rat problem here." Heard this story through a guy who services my soft-serve machines. As info for those not in the ice cream business, most soft-serve machines need to be cleaned, meaning fully disassembled, scrubbed and sanitized, at least weekly, some of them every 3 days. He got a call from a woman complaining that the vanilla side of her machine was coming out with black specks in it. She was worried it might be grinding up an O-ring or worse. He took the head off the machine and claims he nearly lost his lunch as the barrel was infested with cockroaches. Apparently, the woman had never cleaned the machine in the several months she had been open. Somehow, roaches got into it. I guess at night when the barrel stops freezing and just keeps the mix cool so it returns to a liquid, and they were being ground up and expelled as additional protein. How long had it been doing this? About a week. Ugh, poor customers.
I had this happen at a local McDonald's years ago. The friend I was with got a milkshake and took a couple of sips and began pulling foreign objects out of his mouth, enough to realize it was probably a bug. He went back up to the counter to discreetly tell them and ask for a refund. The girl copped a major attitude, to which my friend said, "Well, fine, but you might want to check your machine regardless." She went and opened it up and all the color drained from her face and she gave him a refund.
I worked at a movie theater. One night I was working cash registers and it was busy. This lady awkwardly grabbed something in her purse and tried to hand me something without showing me. I was confused because she had just walked up and put her bag on the counter. I said I can take her money once she puts in her order. She said no, it's a cockroach from her purse and she doesn't want anyone to think we have bugs. I don't like bugs, so I grabbed the nearest coworker and he took it from her. He tried just putting it in the trash. I double-bagged it and took it to the outside garage. Who knew I'd need to be trained on what to do when the customer brings in bugs? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've worked on ice machines during summers and Christmas breaks ever since I was 16. Well, one time I went in to install a new machine at a restaurant with one of the other guys. We get into that kitchen and there were cockroaches absolutely everywhere. Now, this was gross enough, but it got worse. We took off the face of the ice machine to find a huge cockroach in the water sump. So every bit of ice that came out of that machine was cockroach ice. Never went back there and never will. Guys, it's my first time in Bangkok, Thailand. I just went on a food tour. I don't know if you know about Bangkok, but it is humid as heck here. Some of the vendors had fish sitting in cardboard, with flies, cockroaches, and rats as far as the eye can see. I ate all the food though. I'll let you know if I die. Okay, update. I'm past the 24-hour mark for the most questionable thing I ate. So we all believe we're in the clear. Thank you all for your concern, and especially the people who eat this food every day and reassured me that my concerns are completely valid. I do a lot of polishing and chrome plating. I am not a health inspector, but I do a lot of work for restaurants. I got a call to chrome plate some refrigerator racks. It's a common request. These are large 36 to 48 inch long racks and grills that the food sits on. This one high-end steakhouse that I used to go to called me in. Their racks were literally falling apart. There were rusted joints, old food hanging off them. It was just disgusting. I explained that it can't be repaired, but they insisted that we just shine them up, do whatever's needed. I refused that job, left, and wanted to throw up. Never went to that restaurant again. I did immediately call the health department on them. I don't know what happened. I can tell you what they didn't find. When I worked at Denny's, when the health inspector came, the cooks took all of their expired food out of the fridge and stored it in their cars and by the dumpster until after the health inspector had left, and then they put it all back. I ended up quitting that job after I got written up for refusing to change the dates on the labels of all the expired food, which was one of the primary jobs of the graveyard server. So a friend of mine is a health inspector. She walks into a local convenience store and discovers a litter box behind the counter. Totally unacceptable. Tells the proprietor that he needs to get rid of the litter box. That's kind of a health code violation. He replies, "Well, it's for the cat. We've been having mice and rat issues." To which she's all, "Oh." The cat walks up. She tells him he can't have a cat in a food establishment. He hands the cat to his wife and she takes it out of the store to their camper trailer nearby the store. Waits for her to leave. Rinse and repeat. Worked in a restaurant, and whenever a health inspector came, I had to go to the kitchen to tell the cooks to put on gloves and hairnets. It's not that they didn't wash their hands or anything, they were old school with cooking, but it was still a violation. I think in the countries and years that I worked in fast food and restaurants, these things either weren't compulsory, or that rule was so flagrantly disregarded that the entire industry, including the health inspectors, just laughed it off. Wild. A restaurateur was trying to reopen a failed one into a new one. It had been a Mexican joint and was going to be a deli. I was working for a pest control company and they called us to take care of, quote, a few bugs. So no big deal, they're just proactive. I get there and it's clean and smells okay, but I'm about 1 month into this job and experience. I go to get started and I'm mixing up the stuff we have to use in restaurants and I'm using the water from one of their triple sinks. The water is coming out hot. It's a Vegas summer, so I'm letting it run until it cools down some. I look over at the floor sink that the triple sink drains into. and there are a lot of German cockroaches coming out of it. I fill up the 2 gallons, put the pump and handle back in, and shake it to mix it, pump it to pressurize, and get to work. As I'm going and hitting all of the cracks and crevices behind the sinks, the equipment, and under everything, the seam in the wipe-down plastic walls and stuff, roaches just start pouring out into the open. It's in the thousands stage, and when I stand still for long enough, they're trying to hide under my boots. The last time I have to stop to pump up the canister, I'm standing on it, the stainless steel with the brass handle between my feet. Screw this. I call on the radio for a coworker who I know is nearby because he has a fog unit, and I don't at this point. I'm newly hired and I wasn't 100% kitted out. So Tony swings by, I'm waiting outside, and we renegotiate the service. The new owner had been a little on the light side with the depth of his problem. He agrees and we get to fogging. Tony's showing me how to do it, so I'm just walking behind him. At this point, there's tens of thousands of roaches everywhere. Floor, walls, and ceiling. We get to the walk-in, and above, where I think the compressor was, there's a 4-foot by 8-foot by 10-foot space. Tony directs the fog stream up in there, and the roaches start cascading out, pouring out in such numbers that briefly you could barely see the stainless steel of the walk-in door. The entire rest of that day, any little itch on my skin, and you're leaping to slap at it and check it's not a roach stuck on you. They were refilling the Heinz bottles with hunts. I used to be a busboy at a nice Italian restaurant in my hometown. We had problems with the Chinese place across the street because we found out that they'd been taking the lettuce that we threw in the dumpster at the end of the night. Our manager used to stand outside and guard the dumpster so they wouldn't take our garbage. Another experience working at a local cafe, I was cutting up cheese from a walk-in fridge, and I found a hole in the cardboard box that the cheese was kept in. Turned out it was from rats or mice, and they were eating the cheese. I told my manager about it, and he told me to cut around the bite marks and still use the cheese. I left that job shortly after. I worked in the deli of a convenience store for nearly 15 years. It was a constant struggle to explain to my boss how I couldn't save the leftover chicken and veggies and sell them the next morning. My customers were very happy to pay more knowing the food was always fresh. 6 months ago, the boss decided to lease out the kitchen and move me to the main store. Ex-customers kept coming to me to complain about the food tasting bad and making them sick, so I went back to check and counted about 6 violations that would get them shut down or fined. Clorox bleach stored on the floor next to the chicken breading, defrosting meat stored above the vegetables where it dripped down onto them, and at the end of the day the cook took all of the food trays and put them, uncovered, into the fridge to sell the next day without letting them at least cool down. It smelled like rotting food back there since they never clean out the drains. I've also seen her cutting uncooked meat with a machete on the bare floor, and she never ices down the raw chicken at the end of the day, so it starts to stink by midweek. Boss has lost half of his regular customer base. I worked at a Gigi's Cupcakes franchise where the owners just didn't understand that waste was expected and all fresh cupcakes every day were the basis of the company's overpriced appeal. They regularly flipped the bird at the corporate shelf time limits, which were 12 hours for filled cupcakes and 24 for non-filled, only if freshly baked. 12 hours across the board if they were pulled from the freezer, which we were supposed to have a few of at the start of the day while we baked everything all fresh. They hyper-focused on waste and their quality just fell through the floor. Every kitchen staff member quit and they went out of business less than a year later. That should have been an easy cash cow for them, but they just didn't listen. If you promise fresh, people expect fresh. I worked at a sushi and hibachi restaurant for about a year as a server, host, and delivery driver. This place had tons of things that were certainly questionable, but a few of them ended up causing me to leave the place. In the dry storage area, they had cleaning chemicals directly above all of the to-go food packages and plasticware. In that same storage space, I'd randomly see a sleeping bag and pillow tucked away every once in a while. It always stuck out, but I never really thought too much about it until I went out back to grab a bottle of wine, and sure enough, I stepped on a sleeping woman. She started yelling, and I just ran out. My manager pulled me aside later, which I assumed was going to be a conversation about keeping that hush-hush, but no. The dude offered me $25,000 to marry a Thai chick so she could get a green card. My response to him was my 2 weeks' notice. Integrity move. Some of us would have at least stuck around long enough to check if we could take the $25,000 and run, but I respect what you did there. Worked in a popular sandwich shop. Our floor drains were smelling rancid for weeks and were backing up with what I assumed to be sewage. My manager told our owners every single day for 3 weeks that this needed to be fixed, and they did nothing. So in the middle of my shift one day, a health inspector came in and immediately shut us down. My manager told me right there that she had anonymously called the health department because that was the only way the owners were going to end up fixing the problem. Major lol. I ordered tacos from a high-end vegan restaurant in LA. When I bit into the taco, I felt immediately a hard chunk gently slice into the roof of my mouth. I pulled out a 1-inch shard of glass from my taco. Management said they accidentally broke a glass near the tacos, and they thought they got all of it. They offered a new plate of free tacos, but I was like, my mouth is bleeding. Why would I want another taco? This happened to me at Cracker Barrel, but it was a piece of porcelain plate in my coleslaw, so it blended in pretty well. They offered me a discount, with the manager stating that, I guess a plate broke or something. I'm not a big Cracker Barrel fan now. When I was in my late teens, I worked at a 5-star restaurant, don't know how they got that, where they were using potatoes and other produce with maggots in them consistently. Restaurants like these easily charge people $285 to $350 a head for events like New Year's Eve. They got shut down. I work for a local council in the UK, and I was asked by our environmental health officers, or EHOs, to assist with a rat infestation. They wanted to arrange for the tunnels that the rats had borrowed to be filled with concrete. We followed the tunnels along the footway and into the kitchen of a World Bar and Grill, one of those buffet places that do food from all around the world as an all-you-can-eat deal. These tunnels were only small, but once you got into the kitchen, there were over 200 rats. They were in and on everything. Droppings everywhere, nests everywhere, the place was disgusting. I should point out that these rats had been there for up to 6 months, and the restaurant was still open up until the day of the inspection. The guy who owned the place offered to pay extra if we could do it quickly so he could reopen. The EHO laughed and said the place was going to be condemned until he was happy to eat food off the floor. What's your most WTF customer service experience? So, the past weekend we went to a restaurant for dinner with my girlfriend and her friends for her birthday. We had about 10 people and we split the bill across 5 different tabs, each with an 18% minimum tip. The service was awful. The server was rude, sarcastic, and messed up our drink orders twice, and then blamed us. He bought out all the appetizers and entrees at once, and got annoyed when we said we didn't want the apps anymore. One friend paid in cash and didn't get a receipt. She expected around $5 back, but only got $4 and change. When she asked for the receipt, the server just said he threw it away and offered her $1 from his wallet, saying, "How about I just give you $1 if you want it that bad?" We were all real mad. Nobody left an extra tip. I wrote, "Nope," on the tip line of my receipt. As I was washing my hand in the men's room before leaving, the server tapped my shoulder and said, "You think you're pretty funny with that tip, don't you? Why don't we step outside so I can show you how funny I can be?" I was like, what the frick? I called the manager and explained everything while the server stared me down and kept trying to interrupt. Other staff had to calm him down. I declined their gift cards. No way I'm coming back to a place where the staff wants to shank me. In short, terrible service, no tip, server tried to fight me in the bathroom. I was at a department store buying some jeans. I asked the store attendant if I could try on a pair. He said sure and led me to the changing rooms. I went into the cubicle and dropped my pants. The store attendant knocked on the door. I unlocked it and opened it just a crack. He asked if he could come in. I said, "No, why would you want to?" He replied, "Because I think you're cute," and then tried to forcefully open the door, and about 30 seconds of me and him pulling and pushing on the door ensued. I was starting to get a bit frantic, so I yelled out for assistance. He stopped pushing on the door and disappeared. I put on my pants and got out of there. I was shaking. I got home and called the department store and told them what happened. I found out later that they fired him on the spot. Oh, also, I'm a guy. Last weekend I went to the beach with my friend. We'd booked a hotel room with 2 queen beds. For whatever reason, there was an administrative error and the hotel had forgotten to reserve our room. We got there and there are 2 rooms with 2 beds left. The front desk agent was very apologetic and offered us an extra room at no charge because, duh, they messed up. Then the owner of the place moseyed on in and instead said, "No, if you want 2 rooms, you're going to have to pay for 2 rooms," and asked us why we couldn't just sleep together in a king bed, which isn't really his business, and if we wanted to share a bed, we would have booked our own room with 1 bed instead of specifically booking a room with 2. If we had known they were out of rooms, we would have gone somewhere else. At that point, he insisted on us staying in 1 room with a cot, which I said was bullcrap because one of us was sleeping on a cot and it's not something we agreed to pay for. Eventually, after 2 hours of arguing, he effed off and his son, who's the part owner and the one who suggested giving us 2 rooms for the cost of 1 in the first place, let us have the 2 rooms. His dad was clearly in the wrong frickin' business. No kidding. And that's still only half as bad as the service I hear people getting when they use Expedia to book their hotels for them. This video is not sponsored by Expedia. I wonder if that joke's getting old and tired to you guys, or if it's been taken so far that it's just funny that I'm still doing it. You know, the Family Guy tortured joke bit. This joke is not sponsored by Family Guy. I'm from New Hampshire. When I was going to college in Florida, I had a gas station cashier refuse to sell me cigarettes because I showed her my ID and she didn't believe that New Hampshire was a state. I've been refused alcohol in North Carolina because my New York license was too complicated. The lady thought that because it had all the crazy holograms on it, it was a fake. That is not how that's intended to work. A friend had his Hawaii license rejected to buy beer at a grocery store in Texas because the cashier said she'd seen Superbad and knew that Hawaii IDs were easy to fake. The guy was 30 and definitely looked it. I ended up just buying the beer for him with my Texas license. Maybe 10 years back, a new Mountain Mike's Pizzeria opened in my town. Since it's a really small town, my family got excited for a new restaurant, so we went in just a few days after they'd opened. The four of us sat down and we were helped right away. Ordered a large pepperoni pizza and drinks, pretty simple. Our drinks came in a timely fashion. Our pizza did not. We waited, were all pretty patient and understanding, and then an hour passed before we snagged a server to ask about our pizza. There were very few people in this restaurant, and most of the servers were sort of milling around, sweeping and wiping clean tables and other busy work. The guy apologized for the wait and said he'd go check on it for us. He came back out and said that they were very sorry, but it would be another 30 minutes on the pizza. No explanation, but we figured maybe they'd forgotten to put it in. We gave them the benefit of the doubt since they'd just opened. We waited another 45 minutes and no pizza came. Called the server again. He told us he was very sorry and he'd go check on that for us. He came out with a black disc that wasn't even recognizable as pizza. It was a giant charcoal brick. Parts of it were actually smoking. He put it on the table and told us to enjoy our pizza and that they were sorry again about the wait, but they forgot it in the oven. The first time we ordered it. So my dad had finally had enough and very politely told the guy thanks, but no thanks, we wouldn't be eating this, and we'd probably not be returning unless we heard that their service had improved. We stood up to leave and the guy bolted for the back room, and out came the manager. He asked us what the problem was. My dad told him we waited nearly 2 hours to be served a pizza that had been in the oven for just as long. He showed it to the manager. It was literally inedible. The manager shrugged and said, "I don't see anything wrong here, sir, except that you're trying to leave without paying for your meal." The manager ordered the employees to stand at every exit to ensure we couldn't leave. My dad still refused to pay and suggested the manager let us leave or he'd call the police. So the manager called the cops, saying that there was an indignant customer in the restaurant. The cops showed up and asked what the problem was. Manager said we wouldn't pay for our pizza. My dad said the manager wouldn't let us leave, but the guy denied it. Cops scoffed at the manager, walked us out of the restaurant, and we've never eaten there since. Definitely not a bad thing, just kinda surreal. I was at a restaurant with a bunch of co-workers. The waitress was taking our orders. After the 10th person, someone finally asked her, "Are you going to write any of that down?" And she said, "No, I have an eidetic memory." She wasn't kidding. Got all 15 orders perfect and learned all of our names. Oof, well, I've got one from the other side. I used to work in the cancellation department of a major internet service provider who shall remain nameless. Our job was to stop people from cancelling, either by convincing them or bribing them with free time, refunds, whatever it took. It was stressful. The ISP sucked and the customers weren't very tech-savvy. One time when the servers were down, I spent 12 hours getting screamed at. One guy even put all 5 members of his family on the phone to yell at me as well. Anyway, this one time I get a woman. She sounds young and she has a cutesy email address. I go into my whole shtick about her bill and how it's important to have internet. I hear kids, so I go into the whole important for school thing. So I try that. Look, she's pretty nice and tells me that she'd love to keep it, but she can't. So I go through the whole, well, if it's something we can fix, yada yada yada, and nope. She tells me that her and her 2 sons just moved into a homeless shelter and that her husband died. She really wants to keep the account, and she wants desperately to keep the email because she has a bunch of resumes out, but she can't even afford the $2 to keep the email account open. So I put her on hold and go to cancel her account. I must have sat there for a few seconds thinking, just staring at her billing history. She had paid religiously. Then I had an idea. I refunded her every single payment she'd ever made. It took me a little while, and when I went back to the phone, I tried explaining to her that because of her financial trouble, she was getting a refund. She didn't understand at first. I had to repeat myself a few times and then explain exactly what I'd done. Her card had been cancelled because of the non-payment, but I'd just dumped several $100s in refunds into it. I'd paid off her credit card. She wept, not just sobs or sniffles, like openly weeping like a child. It got all emotional, thanking me and crying and having her little kids say thank you. It was nice. In short, I made a woman in a homeless shelter cry, but in a good way. Wow, you might actually be a real-life angel. Even though this was just one step towards helping her get things back on track, this island of decency in the middle of what she was going through was probably such a wonderful thing. Thank you for your service to the less fortunate. Last year, I was going through the self-checkout at Kroger late one night. There were a few other people that said self-checkout, but it was far from busy. I attempted to scan an item that was on clearance and it brings up the "Wait for attendant" message. I see the kid working the section talking to another coworker about 20 feet away. The hand modules they use have an ignore function, so they don't have to come every time someone doesn't know how to use the machines. 95% of the time, they don't need attendance, you see. The guy had hit the ignore button for me. I know that this item isn't going to scan without his approval, so I hit the call attendant button. And he just presses ignore again without looking. This happens 8 times. When I finally went over to ask him for help, he bolted to the back before I could catch him. I wasn't furious, just annoyed. So I left the self-check to go get in a regular line. It just so happened that a manager was walking by and asked if I was having issues, since I was leaving self-checkout. I told her what had happened and she was furious. Never saw that kid at Kroger again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. 20 years ago, my fiancé and I drove to Vegas for the weekend. We lived near LA, so it was about a 5-hour drive. Late Monday night, on the way back to LA, we stopped at the state line to get a bite to eat. In those days, there were just the 2 casinos on either side of the highway, and not the mini metropolis that's there now. The casino was almost completely empty, and the casino restaurant was deserted, except for us. The place had a weird airplanes and clowns theme, was way too brightly lit, and the colors were bright orange and yellow. It was hideous. It was like a McDonald's but without the charm. Being so empty, late at night, and being the state line, being so nauseatingly decorated, we were resigned to a meal just a cut below Denny's. We slid into a plastic orange booth that might have come out of a Taco Bell. The server came over promptly. It was like he'd just appeared out of thin air. He handed us the menu, but then announced that they had a special. Seafood, steak, or whatever, I forget. But it sounded good and it was half the cost of the highest priced item on the menu, so we went with that. The first thing to arrive was our Caesar salad. Only instead of bringing out salads on plates, the waiter brought out a cart and parked it at our table. He then proceeded to handcraft the Caesar dressing right there. A little anchovy, mustard, and whatever the heck else. Worcester, lemon, garlic, capers. It was like the Benihana of Caesar salad right there. Chop, chop, wham, bam. And it was perfect. I mean perfect. The anchovy was just strong enough, but not overpowering. Everything else was in balance, the tartness of the capers, the sour of the lemon, all working together like a gosh darn chamber orchestra. It was nothing less than amazing. Best Caesar salad I've ever had before or since. The food came out pretty quickly and it was expertly prepared. It was exquisite. And you know how servers in already empty restaurants are sometimes like ghosts? You just never see them? This guy was a god amongst waiters. He knew exactly when to show up. Not too much, not too little, just at the right times. Well, the food was incredible, and as the waiter cleared the table, he suggested dessert. I always need coffee, so a little dessert sounded good, and the food had been so great that we decided, how the hell could we miss this? It's a little hazy, but we ordered some sort of peaches and ice cream dessert. The waiter said he was going to need some help with this one, and he disappeared, only to return with another cart, and a woman he introduced as his manager. They set to whipping up a storm on the cart. Evidently, they had to make the syrup for the peaches right there and with whiskey and whatnot, and they created a couple of huge fireballs that went whoosh. Yeah, and the ice cream had to be done just so. It was a spectacle. This was perfect as well. The perfect balance of warmth, hint of alcohol, the tender, juicy peaches, and the sweet, cold ice cream. Damn. Naturally, the coffee was outstanding as well. Rich, black, and smooth. Then the bill came, and you know how I said the special was half the price? The total bill, with dessert, salad, and meal, for 2 of us, was less than $20. Less than $20. The best gosh darn meal I've ever had. The setting was hideous, the expectations were low, but the service was excellent, the food was amazing, and the price was downright shocking. If I recall correctly, we gave him a $20 tip. It wasn't enough, but hey, just over 100%, and I didn't have too much money in those days. I've gone back and looked for the restaurant, but it's gone now. They've built and rebuilt the places so much, nothing's recognizable. And to be honest, I'm not sure which side of the highway we were on. I'll never forget that god-awful decor, though. On a return trip on a Greyhound from Vegas to SoCal, I missed my connecting bus, which happened to be the last one headed out that night. I called customer service and they basically told me, "Herp derp, too bad, next bus out there leaves at 9 tomorrow morning." So, Greyhound left me stranded in the middle of the night in a terrible part of town with a swarm of hobos and smackheads I can only assume wanted to be friends. I had to walk a few miles away until I finally got a hold of a friend who drove out 40 miles to come get me. I used to be a hostess in a pizzeria chain that's based out of Chicago, Winky Face. I came out to work in one in New York, and I'll never forget this family of 8 gave me, the hostess, a $25 tip on a $50 bill, all because they hated their waitress and I was the one that kept refilling their drinks. The waitress was beyond mad, but the manager said to her, "Should have been paying more attention, the tip is hers." Best day ever. Haha, well, I can only assume, judging on how you rated that day, that you hated your coworker nearly as much as the customers did, because 20 extra bucks as a waiter is great, but not a red-letter day or anything. So the quality here came from the spite, and I am here for it. At a Mexican restaurant with a girl I'm getting to know. It wasn't a date, really, it was just like hanging out and getting to know each other, and we decided to go grab a quick bite. Anyways, I've kind of gotten into this horrible habit of only paying with my credit card and never having cash on me. As you probably know, a lot of times when you're paying using debit or credit over a certain amount, I believe it's $5 or $10, places have you sign a receipt that they keep. The receipt the guy at this place handed me had a place to leave a tip. Since I've been to this place a couple of times before, I know how the service works here. You order at the register, go sit down, they call your number, and then you go up and receive your food. So I didn't leave a tip. I'll tip at this place and places like this if I order something specially made or something with extra toppings on it, and they don't charge me. But other than that, I don't really see the need to tip. They aren't bringing your food to you, they aren't doing anything out of their way, they're not bussing tables, there's simply no need. Anyways, I don't leave a tip, and the guy just says, "Wow, big spender here, huh?" I look up at him and I'm like, "What?" Because at this point, I honestly have no idea what he's talking about. It didn't even register in my mind that he could possibly be upset that I didn't tip because he's doing nothing to warrant one. He just stands there and takes orders and calls them out, a job that he is paid an appropriate wage to do, with no extra effort needed to be put in. It'd be the same as tipping someone working a register in a grocery store or at a McDonald's. Well, back on topic, the guy ignores me and says to the girl I'm with, "Glad you're dating such a big spender, he can't even afford to tip. How do you think that's going to go further down the line in your relationship?" She's just kind of baffled. I'm just kind of baffled too, and at that point I just decide it's best to ignore the guy and go sit down, so I shrug it off with a, "Whatever, man." After a bit of an awkward sit, our food comes up, so I go up to go get it and decide to just let it go. We grab our drinks and our burritos and walk out there, while the guy gives me dirty looks and keeps calling me big spender, only to sit down on a bench near the restaurant and find our orders are completely effed up and nothing near what we ordered at all, as well as our drinks only being filled halfway. I'm normally not picky and I would have just said F it and eaten it and written it off as more trouble than it was worth to fix the order, but I'm here with a girl and I don't want to look like a wimp. We take our food into the restaurant where I explain to the guy that our order's messed up and our drinks are only half full. "Oh, complaining about your order and you couldn't even be bothered to tip? Now you're putting me through all this trouble and can't be bothered to tip again?" And just keeps rambling on like that while a line forms behind us and he finally goes to fill up our drinks. He comes back and says, "Whoops," in a Razzie-nominated performance, before he pretends to trip and sends our drinks flying all over me and the girl I'm with. I demand to speak to his manager, and he immediately stops playing his little game, saying stuff like he realizes that he was being a moron before, but that he really did trip and stuff like that. Basically saying anything to beg us not to talk to his manager, and even offering us our money back on the order, but I refuse and keep demanding to talk to his manager until the cook in the back finally hears what's going on and goes to get him. The manager comes out, the girl I'm with and I both explain what happened, and the kid keeps babbling that it was an accident. The manager takes me and the girl I'm with out back to get us cleaned up, and after that's done, he invites us to watch the CCTV footage of what's happened, along with the kid who spilled crap all over us. The kid clearly trips on nothing and deliberately sends the drinks flying onto us. The manager fires the guy on the spot, explains to us that he'd only hired him on for the summer since he was a longtime friend's son and that the kid had been acting like a total butthead the entire time he was employed, but the manager regrettably turned the other cheek as it was his friend's son. The manager was a really nice guy and paid for our meal, as well as giving us a card each that gave us 10 free meals at his restaurant. He even went into the kitchen and cooked our orders himself, gave us to them in to-go bags, and paid for the cab. We'd walked there to take us back to my place so we wouldn't have to walk home in sticky clothes. In short, kid is a jerk because I didn't tip him, deliberately spills sodas on me and the girl I was pseudo-dating, and then gets fired and the manager does an awesome job of making it up to us. You know, I almost always take the side of the worker in these, but it's been really interesting to read the stories of people who genuinely seem to deserve to have been fired for making their non-Karen and Ken customers suffer on purpose. Chalk this one up to nepotism at least. Almost never a good start. Had a waiter spill a $100 bottle of wine, first and last time in my life I ever paid that much for a bottle of wine, all over my dinner. He refused to replace either of them. After I didn't tip him, he literally chased me out of the restaurant and physically threatened me for his tip. He had to be restrained by the manager. I was at an awesome barbecue place in Fort Worth with a bunch of friends. Our server was a bit goofy. He was funny, really nice, but kind of distant. He just seemed like he didn't seem suited to waiting tables. He got our drinks and orders wrong, but it was hard to be upset. The what the frick moment wasn't bad or good, it was just weird. He had a huge red beard and I said, "Dude, your beard is awesome." He then said, "Thanks, my neighbor has one just like it. Some people think he's my dad, but he's not my dad. I've met my dad." Then he just walked away without saying anything. This happened a few years ago to me and my fiancé and our friends. I worked at an Indian restaurant with one of my lady's best pals. The owners of the restaurant had just opened a New Mexican place, so we all decided to go. It had been open about a week, so it would have been understandable if the food and service weren't out of this world, but what we got was amazing. In our group, there were 7 or 8 of us. Next to us is a group of clearly well-to-do people, maybe 6 or so. Our server has only the 2 tables. This is what follows. Our server gets our drink order, doesn't bring them for 20 minutes, takes our food order, that doesn't come for nearly 2 hours. Meanwhile, the rich people next to us get the best service I've ever seen. She was just clearly ignoring us and pegging us as cheap college kids. All of us worked in restaurants. Finally, our food comes and all the orders are wrong. Nobody got correct food. One girl didn't even get her meal until we were about to walk to the door. Oh, also, our drinks never got refilled once. So after a while of this, we get a manager who looks blankly at me and walks away without saying a word. Finally, we get someone else to come talk to us. We explain everything to her. Lastly, we drop the owners' names, saying we work for him and will be telling him everything that happens. The general manager's face goes slate white. They know that they're screwed. After all of this, we just want to leave. They gave up half of the entire meal. Then the server comes up to us and says, "My bad, guys." That's all we got in the form of an apology. We left her a tip of about 3 cents. On our way out, the hostesses are all smiles and asking us how the meal was. I turned to this girl who was clearly unaware of what happened and just went, "It was frickin' terrible." And I grabbed a gigantic handful of peppermints and walked out. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.